Officer Grant Miller grabbed the elderly black woman's arm so hard her faded coat ripped at the shoulder. Her cracked glasses slid beneath the old green Buick as wealthy guests stood beneath the gleaming glass entrance of Charlotte's newest innovation center, watching without saying a single word. No one stepped forward. No one told him to stop. They simply looked away as if a 74-year-old woman being dragged across the pavement belonged somewhere else. But Evelyn Carter didn't shout. She didn't fight back. She quietly picked up the cream-colored envelope that had slipped from her hand, brushed the dust from it with trembling fingers, and whispered, "I was invited." Around her neck, a small silver thimble rested on a thin chain, catching the morning sunlight for just an instant before disappearing beneath her torn collar. Nobody noticed it. Nobody thought it mattered. Officer Miller certainly didn't. He believed he was removing another unwanted stranger from a place reserved for power and privilege. What he couldn't possibly know was that every camera pointed toward that entrance was about to witness the biggest mistake of his career. And within minutes, the truth hidden behind that worn envelope and that tiny silver thimble would turn an entire city upside down. "Step out of the vehicle!" Officer Grant Miller's voice echoed beneath the sweeping glass canopy of the Halston Innovation Center, cutting through the low murmur of arriving guests and the soft hum of luxury engines. The October sky over Charlotte was clear and bright. Sunlight reflected off the towering walls of steel and glass until the entire building seemed wrapped in silver. Valets hurried between polished SUVs and black sedans. Reporters adjusted microphones. Executives wearing tailored suits laughed beneath banners celebrating the grand opening of one of the city's most anticipated corporate landmarks. Everything looked polished. Everything looked important. Except the faded green Buick that slowly rolled toward the entrance. Its paint had dulled with age. One headlight carried a faint crack. The engine gave a quiet rattle before falling silent beneath the covered driveway reserved for honored guests. Officer Grant Miller narrowed his eyes before the driver's door even opened. "What do you think you're doing here?" he demanded. Inside the Buick, Evelyn Carter looked up through wire-rimmed glasses. She was 74 years old. Her silver-gray hair rested neatly beneath a modest navy hat. A dark blue coat covered a simple church dress. Around her neck hung a small silver thimble attached to a delicate chain. Time had polished the metal smooth from years of gentle handling. She smiled politely. "I believe I'm expected this morning." Grant didn't return the smile. He stepped closer, looking over the car as though it offended him simply by existing. "This entrance is for invited guests." "I understand." "Then you also understand you're in the wrong place." "I don't believe I am." His jaw tightened. Around them, several arriving guests slowed without appearing to stop. Conversations softened. Curious eyes drifted toward the unexpected exchange before quickly pretending to focus elsewhere. No one wanted a scene, especially not today. Grant rested one hand against the driver's window. "License." Evelyn reached slowly into her handbag. Every movement was careful, every gesture deliberate. She removed her driver's license, along with a cream-colored envelope embossed with the dark blue seal of Reed Logistics Technologies. "I also have—" "I didn't ask for paperwork." She paused. "Of course." Grant snatched the license first. He barely glanced at the envelope. Charlotte address, age 74, everything valid. His attention returned to the Buick, to the worn steering wheel, the reusable grocery bags stacked neatly in the back seat, the folded quilts, the cardboard box tied with cotton string. None of it belonged in front of a billion-dollar innovation center. "Who's expecting you?" he asked. "The invitation explains." "I asked who." Evelyn looked directly at him. "My name is Evelyn Carter." He waited. She offered nothing else. Grant gave a short laugh. "That doesn't answer the question." "It should." Something about the calm certainty in her voice irritated him far more than an argument would have. Behind him, event director Claire Whitman emerged from the revolving doors. Her cream-colored suit matched the polished marble lobby behind her. A headset rested over one ear as she directed caterers and photographers with quick, efficient gestures. She noticed Grant speaking with the woman in the old Buick. Then she noticed the line of luxury vehicles beginning to form behind it. Her expression tightened. She crossed the driveway in brisk, practiced steps. "Officer Miller? We've got a problem." Claire looked towards Evelyn. Only for a second. Long enough to notice the modest coat, the older car, the grocery boxes, the absence of designer luggage or security detail. Then she looked away. What seems to be the issue? She claims she's invited. Claire extended one hand. The invitation? Evelyn offered the cream envelope. Claire accepted it but never opened it. Instead, she examined Evelyn, then the Buick, then the line of waiting vehicles. "I'm afraid there may have been some confusion," Claire said with polished professionalism. "Today's ceremony is private." "I understand. You'll need to leave the arrival lane." "I was asked to come." Claire forced another smile. "I'm sure someone meant well. I don't believe this invitation was sent by mistake." Claire sighed almost imperceptibly. "Officer." Grant nodded. "I've got it." He handed the unopened envelope back. "Start the car." Evelyn remained seated. "I would appreciate it if someone could simply call Mr. Marcus Reed's office." Grant blinked. Claire almost laughed. "You know Marcus Reed?" "I do." Claire exchanged a brief glance with Grant. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Grant folded his arms. "Mr. Reed isn't available." "I understand. So stop pretending." "I wasn't pretending." Her voice never rose, never sharpened, never showed embarrassment, only quiet certainty. That somehow irritated Grant even more. Behind the Buick, impatient drivers began shifting in their seats. One chauffeur glanced at his watch. Another leaned lightly against his horn before quickly stopping. The sound echoed beneath the glass canopy. Claire lowered her voice. "Officer, we cannot have this delaying arrivals." Grant nodded once. Then he reached for the driver's door. Last chance. Evelyn placed one hand gently on the cream envelope resting in her lap. "I don't want trouble." "Then move." "I simply wish to attend the ceremony." Grant yanked the door open. The motion was so sudden, Evelyn barely had time to steady herself. The October breeze swept into the car. Several guests gasped quietly. Still, no one moved. Grant leaned inside. "Out. I can step out on my own. Now!" He grabbed her upper arm. Not violently, not gently either. Firm enough that she winced. She instinctively reached toward the doorframe for balance. Her glasses slipped forward. The cream envelope slid from her lap. The silver thimble around her neck swung softly against her coat. "Please," Evelyn said quietly. "My shoulder isn't very strong." Grant ignored her. He pulled. Her shoes found the pavement awkwardly. She stumbled. One heel caught the edge of the curb. The torn sound of fabric echoed sharply beneath the covered entrance. Her coat sleeve ripped at the shoulder. Her glasses fell. One lens struck the concrete. The frames slid beneath the Buick. Several people flinched. A woman holding a conference badge covered her mouth. A valet took one step forward, then looked toward Claire. Claire remained perfectly still. The valet stepped back again. Silence settled over the entrance. Not empty silence, crowded silence. The kind filled with people waiting for someone else to do the difficult thing. Evelyn steadied herself by resting one hand against the Buick. She inhaled slowly, then straightened. Grant released her arm only long enough to point toward the exit. "You're leaving." She looked down. The cream envelope had slipped beneath the front tire. She didn't reach for it. Instead, she quietly said, "My invitation." Grant followed her gaze. Without hesitation, he stepped forward. His polished boot came down squarely on top of the envelope. The heavy leather pressed it flat against the pavement. Something inside cracked softly. Perhaps cardboard. Perhaps old paper. Perhaps something else entirely. Evelyn closed her eyes for only a heartbeat. When she opened them again, she looked not at the envelope, but at Grant. "I wish you hadn't done that." "Oh yeah?" "It was important." Grant shrugged. "So are the rules." Around them, phones slowly appeared. One executive raised his camera halfway, then lowered it again. A reporter whispered to another. Neither intervened. Claire checked her watch. The schedule mattered. The ceremony mattered. The image mattered. One elderly woman in an old Buick did not. Grant reached toward the passenger door. "If you won't leave, I'll have your vehicle moved." Evelyn gently shook her head. "There are things inside that belong to other people. I don't care. I promised I'd deliver them. I said I don't care." The words landed harder than the grip on her arm. For the first time, something passed briefly across Evelyn's face. Not anger, not fear, recognition. As though she had heard those words before, many years ago, in another place, from another stranger who decided she didn't belong. She lowered her eyes only long enough to steady herself. When she looked up again, her voice remained soft. "I hope one day you understand that every person standing here belongs somewhere." Grant rolled his eyes. "Lady, save the speeches." The revolving doors opened once more. Several executives emerged laughing together, then stopped. Their conversation dissolved as they noticed the growing crowd, farther down the driveway. A sleek black limousine turned beneath the entrance canopy. Its polished finish reflected the entire scene like dark water. Security staff immediately straightened. Photographers lifted cameras. Claire's expression transformed instantly into polished enthusiasm. "He's here." Grant glanced toward the limousine. Perfect timing. He'd clear this embarrassment before the guest of honor stepped out. The limousine slowed. Stopped. The rear passenger door opened. A tall black man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit stepped onto the pavement. Marcus Reed, founder of Reed Logistics Technologies, one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in the country. Applause began almost automatically, then stopped. Marcus wasn't looking toward the building. He wasn't looking at the cameras. He wasn't acknowledging investors or politicians. His eyes had fixed on only one thing. Officer Grant Miller's hand was once again gripping Evelyn Carter's arm. Marcus froze. The smile disappeared from his face. The applause died completely. Every head turned toward him for one long heartbeat. No one moved. Then Marcus started walking. Fast. His voice cut across the silent entrance with a force that froze every person beneath the glass canopy. "Get your hands off my grandma!" For one suspended moment, the world seemed to stop breathing. Officer Grant Miller's grip loosened without his realizing it. Claire Whitman stared at Marcus Reed, certain she had misheard. The investors, reporters, and executives looked from the billionaire to the elderly woman standing beside the faded Buick, trying to fit two impossible images together. Marcus Reed wasn't looking at any of them. His eyes never left Evelyn Carter. The silver thimble resting against her coat caught the morning sunlight for just an instant. Then, 3 hours earlier, warm yellow light spilled from the windows of Carter's Corner long before sunrise reached the streets of Brookside Terrace. The neighborhood was one of Charlotte's oldest working-class communities, where brick buildings carried decades of repairs and front porches leaned slightly from years of weather. Delivery trucks rumbled past before dawn. City buses sighed to a stop every 15 minutes. Somewhere nearby, someone had already started frying bacon, and the scent drifted through the cool October air. Above the small tailoring shop, Evelyn Carter switched on the kitchen light in her apartment. She never needed an alarm clock. 40 years of opening a business before sunrise had trained her body to wake before the city. The kettle began to whistle. She poured hot water into a chipped blue mug that had survived 3 apartments, 1 house, and countless moves she never wanted to make. Outside, rain from the previous evening still clung to the sidewalks, leaving everything smelling clean. She stood quietly beside the window for a moment. Brookside Terrace was waking up. Mr. Hernandez unlocked his tiny grocery store across the street. The city sanitation crew parked 2 blocks away. A bus hissed to the curb. Ordinary sounds. Comforting sounds. The kind that reminded Evelyn she still belonged somewhere. She smiled softly before picking up the silver thimble resting on the kitchen table. It wasn't valuable. Anyone looking at it would probably mistake it for an old sewing tool. To Evelyn, it was something else entirely. She rubbed it gently with her thumb before slipping it onto the chain around her neck. "Morning, Samuel," she whispered. Her late husband's name still came naturally after all these years. He had given her that thimble the day Carter's tailoring shop first opened. Neither of them had imagined then how much life would change. She finished her tea and walked downstairs. The little bell above Carter's corner rang softly as she unlocked the front door. The room smelled exactly as it always had. Cotton fabric, fresh thread, steam from yesterday's ironing, lavender furniture polish. Against one wall stood 3 sewing machines, each older than many of the apartment buildings rising across Charlotte. A faded photograph hung beside the register. It showed Evelyn standing proudly in front of Carter's tailoring shop decades earlier. Her husband beside her, both smiling, both believing hard work could protect a family forever. Someone knocked gently. Before Evelyn could answer, the door opened. "Morning, Miss Evelyn." Thomas Green stepped inside carrying a folded hospital uniform. At 56, Thomas worked overnight maintenance at Charlotte Memorial Hospital. A week earlier, he'd caught his sleeve on a broken cabinet hinge. "You think you can save this old thing?" Evelyn unfolded the jacket carefully. "It's not old," Thomas laughed. "Feels old." The stitching came loose. She examined the tear. Nothing more. "I can pay next Friday." "You already paid." Thomas frowned. "I didn't." "You've worked 12-hour shifts all week," she smiled. "You paid by keeping people safe." Thomas shook his head. "You keep saying things like that. And you keep bringing me uniforms." Within minutes, the sewing machine hummed steadily. The damaged seam disappeared beneath practiced hands. Thomas watched in quiet admiration. "I swear you make things look new." Evelyn handed him the repaired jacket. "I just remind them what they already were." He reached for his wallet. She gently closed it again. "No. You've got bills too. So do you. You shouldn't always—" "I know," she smiled, "but I probably will." Thomas finally surrendered. "Thank you. Take care of yourself." "I'll try." When he left, the bell chimed again. The room became quiet. Only for a minute, another knock. This time it was Marcus Bell, 49, a warehouse worker recovering from surgery after an accident loading freight containers. He walked slowly with the help of a cane. "I hate asking." "I know. I just need somebody to carry these." He pointed toward 2 grocery bags sitting outside the door. "My doctor says no lifting another week." Evelyn reached for her coat. "Let's go. You've got work. So do you." Together they crossed the narrow sidewalk. She carried every bag upstairs to his apartment without complaint. Vegetables, soup, medicine, laundry detergent. Simple things. Things Marcus could not safely lift. When she finished, he looked embarrassed. "I owe you." "You owe your shoulder time to heal." "I'll pay you back." She laughed quietly. "You already will." "How?" "When someone else needs help," he smiled. "I can do that." "I know." Back downstairs, the morning had grown brighter. Traffic increased. People hurried toward buses. Someone across the street waved. Evelyn waved back. Her shop never made anyone rich, but somehow it had become part of the neighborhood's rhythm. Another customer arrived. Linda Brooks, 68 years old, wrapped in an oversized brown sweater despite the mild weather. She stood awkwardly in the doorway. "Evelyn, come in." Linda hesitated. "My pension's late again." Evelyn already understood. Without saying a word, she reached into the small cash drawer beneath the register. She removed enough bills for bus fare. Linda immediately shook her head. "No." "Yes." "I'll feel terrible." "You'll feel better once you get to your doctor's appointment." Linda sighed. "I hate needing help." "So do most people." Evelyn folded the money into Linda's hand. "There." Linda's eyes shimmered. "You've been taking care of everybody around here for years. I've been living here." "That's not the same thing." Evelyn smiled. "Maybe not." Linda looked around the tailoring shop. "You ever miss the old place?" Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, simply honest. "The first shop?" Evelyn asked. Linda nodded. "The one before?" "Before." Neither woman finished the sentence. They both remembered. The redevelopment project, the soaring property taxes, the investors, the notices taped to storefront windows, the promises that revitalization would benefit everyone. It hadn't. Evelyn had sold everything just to avoid losing even more. The neighborhood changed. Luxury apartments replaced local businesses. Only Carter's Corner remained. Smaller, simpler. Enough. "I miss Samuel more than I miss the building," Evelyn finally said. Linda reached across the counter. "He'd be proud of you." "I hope so." Another glance drifted toward the silver thimble hanging around Evelyn's neck. "You still wear it every day." "I always will." Linda smiled. "He'd like that." After she left, Evelyn locked the register. She climbed the narrow staircase back to her apartment. The bedroom closet held only a few dresses. She chose a navy one. Nothing expensive, nothing designed to impress. Just neat, pressed, respectful. On the dining table waited a cream-colored envelope. Beside it rested two objects, an old photograph, a folded handwritten agreement. She carefully placed both inside, then paused. For several seconds, she simply looked at the envelope. Someone had offered to send a luxury sedan that morning. She had politely declined. Her Buick had carried her through 20 years of ordinary life. It would carry her one more day. She picked up her keys. Before leaving, she looked once around the quiet apartment. The photographs, the sewing basket, Samuel's old rocking chair near the window. Everything she truly valued still fit inside these modest rooms. Outside, sunlight warmed Brookside Terrace. Evelyn locked the shop door and slipped the cream envelope onto the passenger seat of the green Buick. The silver thimble rested against her heart. She smiled to herself. "Well, Samuel, I suppose we'd better not keep them waiting." She started the engine. The old Buick rumbled softly to life. As it disappeared down the street, several neighbors waved without thinking. To them, she wasn't someone important. She was simply Miss Evelyn, the woman who always showed up when someone needed help. None of them knew she was driving toward the most exclusive corporate event in Charlotte, and none of them could have guessed why the invitation waiting beside her carried the seal of one of America's largest companies. Across town, the Halston Innovation Center stood above the financial district, like a monument to certainty. Its 40-story glass facade caught the morning sun and broke it into hard white reflections. Steel columns framed the entrance. A wide canopy stretched over the circular drive, sheltering black sedans, polished SUVs, and town cars as they moved through in a steady, expensive rhythm. Inside, the lobby shone with pale marble and brushed brass. A suspended sculpture of interlocking silver rings turned slowly above the reception desk. Tall screens displayed the Reed Logistics Technologies logo beside images of emergency supply routes, hospital networks, and cargo planes crossing glowing maps of the United States. Everything in the building had been designed to suggest motion, precision, and power. Nothing had been left to chance. Claire Whitman intended to keep it that way. She stood near the registration tables with a headset pressed to one ear and a tablet balanced in her hand. Move the hospital delegation to the west reception area. A staff member nodded and hurried away. The governor's transportation advisor arrives at 10:20. I want the entrance cleared 5 minutes before that. Another nod. And someone straighten those name cards. They look uneven. Claire had spent 9 months planning the opening ceremony. She knew which donors required private elevators, which executives preferred sparkling water, which reporters had permission to enter the restricted hall, which guests expected to be recognized before they introduced themselves. To Claire, hospitality meant making important people feel even more important. She crossed the lobby and stopped beneath a large black and white photograph mounted along the east wall. It showed a pair of dark-skinned hands resting on an industrial sewing table. One hand held a silver thimble. Beside it lay a folded blueprint and an old metal key. The photograph was part of an exhibit titled "The Hands That Built the Future." Claire barely looked at it. She was more concerned with the white covering draped over the bronze plaque beneath the central staircase. "That curtain is crooked," she said. A young technician adjusted it. "Better?" Claire tilted her head. "Half an inch to the left." Outside, Officer Grant Miller surveyed the arrival lane with his thumbs hooked into his duty belt. He was 38, broad through the shoulders, and wore his police uniform even though today's assignment had been arranged through a private security contractor. The badge gave clients confidence. It also gave Grant something he enjoyed more than confidence: immediate obedience. Beside him stood Daniel Price, 34, wearing the dark gray uniform of Continental Protective Services. Daniel held a printed guest list on a clipboard. Unlike Grant, he kept checking it. "You know, half these people aren't going to use the right entrance," Grant said. Daniel glanced toward the curb. "Then we redirect them." Grant smiled without humor. "You redirect, I keep trouble out." A catering van rolled toward the service drive. Grant pointed sharply. "Wrong way." The driver, a black man in his late 50s, lowered his window. "Sign says deliveries this direction." "Not today. The loading manager told me." Grant slapped the side of the van twice with his palm. "Back it up." The driver stared at him for a second, then shifted into reverse. Daniel watched the van retreat. "You could have just shown him the service entrance." "He found it." "He didn't." "He will." Grant turned away. Daniel said nothing more. He had worked beside Grant 6 times during corporate events. Each time he had noticed the same pattern. Grant was polite to people who looked wealthy before they spoke, suspicious of people who looked ordinary even after they explained themselves. Daniel had told himself it was attitude, pressure, maybe habit. He had never called it what it was, not out loud. Claire emerged through the revolving doors. "Officers." Grant straightened. "Ms. Whitman. We're expecting several high-profile arrivals in the next hour. We're ready. I need the front drive clean and controlled." Grant nodded. "No loitering, no delivery vehicles, no guests who can't verify access immediately." Daniel looked down at the clipboard. Claire continued. "If someone appears confused, direct them away from the cameras before it becomes a distraction." Grant's expression sharpened with satisfaction. "Understood." Claire turned to Daniel. "Did you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." She started back toward the doors, then stopped. "And use judgment. This is not the day to be overly generous." The revolving doors carried her inside. Grant gave a quiet laugh. "See?" Daniel looked at him. "See what?" "She wants standards. She said use judgment." "Same thing." Daniel lowered his eyes to the guest list. The top page contained political officials and company officers. The next listed hospital administrators, investors, and invited press. The final page was marked Restricted Honorees. There were only 6 names: Marcus Reed, Rachel Foster, Dr. Helen Morris, Arthur Sloan, Linda Mercer, Evelyn Carter. Daniel paused at the last name. No title followed it, no company, no security note. Only a handwritten instruction in the margin. Personal arrival. Do not redirect. He read it twice. Grant. What? This last guest, Evelyn Carter. There's a special note. Grant was watching a valet struggle with a luggage cart. Then remember it. No photograph, no vehicle description. Probably some donor's widow. Maybe. Grant finally looked at the page. Evelyn Carter. He shrugged. Sounds 80. Daniel tapped the handwritten note. It says, do not redirect. Grant took the clipboard, glanced at the line and handed it back. Then don't redirect her if she shows up. How are we supposed to identify her? Ask, Daniel almost replied. Instead, he clipped the list back into place. A row of luxury vehicles began entering the circular drive. Grant's whole manner changed. He opened doors, greeted executives, called one man sir before checking his name. When a white couple in golf clothes arrived without their printed passes, Grant waved them through after the husband mentioned a board member. Daniel checked the list and found neither name. You let them in. Grant kept smiling toward the couple. They're fine. How do you know? Grant turned. Look at them. The answer sat between them. Clear, ugly. Daniel felt it, but once again he said nothing. Inside, the lobby filled with the soft sounds of wealth, clinking glassware, low laughter, leather shoes crossing marble, camera shutters. A jazz trio played near the north wall beneath warm amber lights. Waiters circulated with trays of coffee and pastries no one seemed hungry enough to eat. Near the archival display, an elderly hospital administrator named Margaret Ellis stopped in front of the photograph with the silver thimble. She studied it. I've seen that before, she murmured. A colleague beside her glanced up. The photograph? The thimble. Where? Margaret frowned, trying to place the memory. Then someone called her name from across the lobby. She turned away. Outside, Daniel checked his watch. 9:48. Claire's voice came through the radio. Front entrance status. Grant lifted his shoulder microphone. Secure. Keep it that way. He released the button. A city bus rolled past the far end of the block, brakes sighing at the corner. Traffic moved steadily beneath the high-rise shadows. Then, several hundred feet away, a faded green Buick turned toward the Halston Innovation Center. It moved carefully between two black SUVs before entering the arrival lane. Grant noticed it immediately. His smile disappeared. What is that? Daniel looked up. The Buick approached at a slow, respectful speed. Behind the windshield sat an elderly black woman in a navy hat. A cream envelope rested on the passenger seat. Sunlight touched something silver at her throat. Daniel glanced down at his list. Evelyn Carter. The name seemed to rise from the page. He stepped forward. Grant moved faster. The officer planted himself in the middle of the lane and raised one hand. The Buick stopped. Through the windshield, the woman offered a polite, uncertain smile. Grant looked at the worn paint, the grocery boxes in the back, the modest clothes. Then he looked toward the glass doors, where donors and cameras waited. His expression hardened before she had said a single word. Daniel opened his mouth. He could have called Grant back. He could have checked the name. He could have looked again at the handwritten warning. Personal arrival. Do not redirect. Instead, he stood beneath the shining glass canopy with the clipboard pressed against his chest. Grant walked toward the driver's window, and Daniel let him go alone. Evelyn lowered the glass halfway. The morning air carried the faint smell of coffee from the catering station and hot rubber from the line of idling cars behind her. Beyond Grant's shoulder, the Halston Innovation Center rose like a wall of light. Its glass doors opened and closed around people in tailored suits, each one stepping inside without being questioned. Grant bent toward the window. "You lost?" "No, officer." His eyes moved over her hat, her coat, and the worn steering wheel beneath her hands. "This lane is restricted. I was directed here." "By who?" Evelyn glanced toward the cream envelope on the passenger seat. "My invitation says the main entrance." Grant followed her eyes. "Hand it over." She reached carefully across the console and lifted the envelope. The seal of Reed Logistics Technologies was pressed into the thick paper in dark blue wax. Her full name appeared across the front in raised black lettering, Mrs. Evelyn Carter. Grant took it without thanks. He turned it over once, then looked back at her. "Where did you get this?" "It was delivered to my shop." "Your shop?" "Carter's Corner. Never heard of it. It is in Brookside Terrace." That answer changed something in his expression. Only slightly. The suspicion that had already been there hardened into certainty. "Brookside Terrace?" "Yes." Grant looked over the roof of the Buick toward Daniel. Daniel still held the guest list. Their eyes met. Daniel could have walked forward then. He could have said her name was printed on the restricted page. Instead, he stayed where he was. Grant turned back to Evelyn. "You expect me to believe somebody sent a private corporate invitation to a sewing shop in Brookside Terrace?" Evelyn's fingers tightened gently around the steering wheel. "I don't expect you to believe anything without checking." Her answer was calm, reasonable. That seemed to bother him more. He opened the envelope just enough to see the gold-edged card inside. The printed invitation named Evelyn Carter as an honored guest at the dedication ceremony for the Halston Innovation Center. Grant read the first line, then stopped. He did not read the rest. Anybody can print something like this. Evelyn looked at the heavy paper in his hand. "I imagine it would be difficult to reproduce the seal. People steal invitations. I did not steal it. People find them. I did not find it. You got identification?" She reached toward her handbag. Grant's hand moved immediately to his belt. "Slow." Evelyn stopped. "My wallet is inside the front pocket." "I said slow." She nodded once. "Yes, officer." She opened the bag with 2 fingers and removed her driver's license. Grant took it. The name matched. The address matched Brookside Terrace. The photograph matched the woman sitting before him. He studied it longer than necessary. Then he glanced at the registration sticker on the windshield. "Stay here." He walked back toward Daniel. The line of vehicles behind the Buick had grown. A black SUV waited directly behind her, followed by a silver sedan with tinted windows. A driver leaned toward his steering wheel and checked the time. Claire's voice crackled through Grant's shoulder radio. "Why is the lane stopped?" Grant lifted the microphone. "Possible unauthorized access. Handle it quickly." "Working on it." He reached Daniel. "Run this." Daniel took Evelyn's license. He looked at the name, then down at the guest list already in his hand. Evelyn Carter. Restricted honorees. Personal arrival. Do not redirect. His mouth went dry. "Grant." "What?" "She's on the list." Grant barely glanced down. "Which list?" "The restricted honorees page." "So?" "So she's expected." Grant took the clipboard and read the line. For half a second, uncertainty crossed his face. Then he looked toward the old Buick. The grocery boxes, the quilt folded in the rear window, the elderly black woman waiting quietly behind the wheel. His disbelief returned. Could be another Evelyn Carter. The note says personal arrival. No photograph. The invitation matches. Could be stolen. Daniel lowered his voice. Her license matches too. Grant handed the clipboard back. "You want to explain to Claire that you waved in the wrong woman during a press event?" Daniel looked toward Evelyn. "No." "Then let me do my job." Grant returned to the car. Evelyn had not moved. Both hands rested on the wheel. Your identification is valid, he said. Thank you. That doesn't verify the invitation. Then perhaps someone inside can. No. She waited. Grant placed her license on the roof of the Buick rather than handing it back. I need you to move the vehicle. Officer, my name is on the guest list. His eyes narrowed. You don't know what's on the guest list. Your partner appeared to check it. Grant leaned closer. You watching us now? I was looked through the windshield. That wasn't my question. Evelyn drew a slow breath. I am not trying to cause trouble. Then leave. The revolving doors turned behind him. Claire Whitman crossed the lobby with quick, impatient steps. Her heels clicked against the stone, then softened when she reached the carpeted entrance. She saw the stopped lane, the guests watching through the glass, the Buick sitting beneath the center's silver logo. Her face tightened. Oh. Officer Miller. Grant stepped back. Invitation issue. Claire approached Evelyn's window. Her smile was thin and professionally arranged. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Claire Whitman, event director. Evelyn Carter. Claire nodded as though the name meant nothing. I understand you believe you're attending today's ceremony. I was invited. May I see the invitation? Grant handed it to her. Claire removed the card and examined it. Unlike Grant, she read every line. Her eyes paused over the words honored guest, then over Evelyn's name. Something flickered across her face. Not recognition, concern. She looked toward Daniel. Is this name on the list? Daniel answered carefully. Yes, ma'am. Claire's gaze returned to Evelyn. What organization are you representing? Myself. Are you affiliated with one of the hospital systems? No. A donor group? No. Municipal government? No. Claire held the card between two manicured fingers. Then there may have been an administrative mistake. Evelyn's expression remained gentle. I don't believe there was. Claire looked into the Buick. The boxes of groceries, the folded clothing, a paper bag from a neighborhood pharmacy. Her certainty seemed to settle. Mrs. Carter, this event has very strict access requirements. I understand. We cannot admit every person whose name happens to appear on a document. My name does not happen to appear there. Claire's smile disappeared. Behind them, a reporter raised her phone. A hospital executive stopped near the doorway. The line of cars continued to wait. Evelyn saw all of it. The irritation, the curiosity, the silent judgment. She kept her voice level. Please call Marcus Reed's office. Claire gave the small breath that sounded almost like a laugh. Mr. Reed is preparing for a major public ceremony. I know. He is not available for personal verification. His assistant will be. Claire glanced toward Grant, then back at Evelyn. How exactly do you know Marcus Reed? The question carried more accusation than curiosity. Evelyn looked at her for a long moment. She could have answered. One word would have ended everything. Grandson. Instead, she said, he knows me. Claire's eyebrows lifted. I'm sure many people feel that way. I don't feel it. Grant folded his arms. Claire lowered the invitation. Mrs. Carter, we have investors arriving, hospital leaders, state officials. This entrance cannot remain blocked while we investigate an unsupported claim. It is supported by my identification, your guest list, and the invitation in your hand. Claire's cheeks colored slightly. You are becoming argumentative. Evelyn looked at her. I am answering you. A soft murmur moved through the people near the doors. No one stepped forward. Daniel stared at the note beside Evelyn's name. Do not redirect. He felt those words becoming heavier by the second. Claire handed the invitation back to Grant. Remove the vehicle from the arrival lane. Evelyn turned slightly toward her. Miss Whitman, I came because I was asked to be here. Claire looked at the cracked pavement beside the Buick rather than at Evelyn's face. People receive things meant for someone else every day. This was meant for me. People also misunderstand the level of access they have. I have misunderstood nothing. That calm answer stripped away Claire's practiced politeness. Her voice cooled. Women from Brookside Terrace do not simply arrive at events like this and demand access to billionaire CEOs. The words hung beneath the glass canopy, clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. Evelyn did not react outwardly, but something inside her went still. Grant smirked. Claire continued, Mr. Reed does not know women from places like that. Evelyn's gaze lifted to the towering building. For a brief instant, she saw another structure. A small brick storefront with blue paint around the windows. Carter's tailoring shop. The place she had opened with Samuel when money was scarce and hope was not. She remembered notices taped to the door. Developers promising renewal. Bank officers avoiding her eyes. Men in expensive coats explaining that the neighborhood was changing. And businesses like hers no longer fit the future they were building. She had heard the same message then. People like you do not belong in what comes next. Evelyn returned her gaze to Claire. Her voice remained soft. You may be surprised by who people know. Claire stiffened. Officer Miller, clear the lane. Grant stepped toward the driver's door. Evelyn placed one hand on the cream envelope. Daniel finally moved. Only one step. Grant, maybe we should call upstairs. Grant turned sharply. Stay at your post. The note says not to redirect her. Claire looked at Daniel as though noticing him for the first time. What note? He lifted the clipboard. Beside her name. Claire took it. Her eyes found the handwriting. For a moment, even she hesitated. Then the sound of a horn came from the silver sedan behind them. Claire looked at the waiting vehicles, at the cameras, at Evelyn. She handed the clipboard back. We do not have time for this. Daniel's face changed. Not enough to stop her. Only enough to show that he knew she was wrong. Grant pulled the handle. The Buick's door opened. Cold air rushed into the car. Evelyn held the envelope against her chest. Officer, I can move on my own. You're not moving the car. His hand closed around her arm. I said, get out. Around them, the crowd fell silent. Not one person came closer. Not one voice said stop. And as Grant began pulling Evelyn from the Buick, the cream envelope slipped from her fingers and slid toward the pavement. It landed near the front tire, struck the curb, and disappeared halfway beneath the car. Evelyn saw it fall. Her attention moved toward it for only a second. That was enough for Grant to tighten his grip. I told you to get out. I am getting out, she said. Please don't pull my shoulder. He ignored her. The old Buick sat low to the ground, and Evelyn had to turn carefully to bring both feet onto the pavement. Before she could steady herself, Grant pulled again. Her right shoe caught against the doorframe. The heel bent beneath her weight. She stumbled forward. A soft gasp moved through the crowd. Her glasses slipped from her face and struck the concrete beside the car. One lens cracked across the center. The frames bounced once, then skidded into the shadow beneath the Buick. The world around Evelyn blurred. The glass building became a wall of pale light. The faces gathered near the entrance lost their features. She could still see Grant's uniform, dark and solid in front of her, but his expression had become little more than a hard shape. She reached for the door. The seam of her coat tore near the shoulder. The sound was small, a quick rip of old fabric. Still, it seemed louder than the cameras clicking beneath the canopy. Evelyn drew in a sharp breath. Grant released her only after both feet were on the ground. Stand over there. She placed one hand on the Buick's roof to keep her balance. My glasses fell. You can get them later. I can't see clearly without them. Then don't move. A few people shifted uneasily. A woman in a burgundy suit looked toward the security desk inside the lobby. A man wearing a hospital board badge took his phone from his pocket and raised it chest high. Neither one spoke. Claire stood several feet away with her arms folded. Her eyes moved from Evelyn's torn coat to the growing line of vehicles. "Officer Miller, please resolve this." Grant nodded. He opened the Buick's rear door. Evelyn turned toward the sound. "What are you doing?" "Checking the vehicle." "You do not have my permission." Grant glanced back at her. "I don't need it." Daniel stepped forward. "Grant, she hasn't threatened anyone." Grant faced him. "She entered a restricted security zone with questionable credentials. Her name is on the list. We've been over this." Claire gave Daniel a warning look. "Let Officer Miller handle the situation." Daniel's jaw tightened. He stopped moving. Grant leaned into the back seat. The first thing he pulled out was a clear plastic bag containing folded work uniforms. Each one had been washed, pressed, and repaired. Small pieces of masking tape carried handwritten names: Thomas Green, Melissa Howard, Franklin Davis. Grant dropped the bag onto the pavement. It landed beside the curb. Evelyn's voice remained controlled. "Please be careful. Those belong to hospital workers." Grant reached in again. He removed 2 paper grocery bags packed with canned soup, rice, oatmeal, and bottled medicine. "What's all this?" "Groceries." "For who?" "People who need them." "Names?" Evelyn looked toward him through the blur. "That is private." Grant gave a short laugh. "Now you care about privacy." He set one grocery bag down too hard. A can rolled out and crossed the pavement in a slow silver circle. It stopped near the polished shoe of an executive. The man looked down at it, then stepped around it. Grant pulled out a wooden sewing box. The latch opened when it struck the ground. Spools of thread scattered across the driveway: red, blue, black, white. They rolled beneath the tires of waiting cars and caught in the seams of the pavement like tiny bright beads. Evelyn closed her eyes. For a moment, she was not outside the Halston Innovation Center. She was back in Carter's tailoring shop years earlier, standing behind a long wooden counter while Samuel organized thread by color and complained that she kept putting the scissors in the wrong drawer. She could hear his laugh, could almost smell the steam from the old iron. Then a horn sounded behind the Buick, and the memory vanished. "Officer," Evelyn said, "there is nothing dangerous in my car." Grant lifted a canvas pharmacy bag. "Medication. It belongs to an injured man in my neighborhood." "You transport other people's medication?" "I picked up his prescription because he cannot drive." Grant examined the label. The name matched the handwritten card attached to the grocery bag. That should have ended the suspicion. Instead, he tossed the pharmacy bag onto the front seat. "Convenient story. It is the truth." He pulled the passenger door open. The cream envelope remained hidden beneath the front of the car. Evelyn could no longer see it, but she knew exactly where it had fallen. "Please don't move the Buick yet." Grant leaned across the passenger seat. "Why?" "My envelope is underneath it." Claire exhaled in frustration. "We can replace an invitation." "It is not only an invitation." Grant looked toward the pavement. "What else is in it?" "Private papers." "What kind of papers?" Evelyn hesitated, not because she was afraid of the truth, because the papers were not meant to win an argument in a driveway. They belonged to another time, another promise. A day when a young man with an uncertain future sat across from her in an empty warehouse office and swore that her sacrifice would not be wasted. "They are family documents," she said. Grant stepped toward the front tire. "Then you should have kept a better hold on them." He bent just enough to see the edge of the cream paper beneath the Buick. Daniel saw it too. He moved forward again. "I'll get it." Grant blocked him with one arm. "I've got it." But he did not reach down. Instead, he placed the sole of his boot directly over the exposed corner. Evelyn heard the paper scrape against the concrete. "Please," she said. The word came softly, not weakly. Claire looked away. Several phones rose higher. A reporter whispered, "Is anyone getting this?" A valet answered, "Everybody is." Still, no one stepped between Grant and Evelyn. Grant pressed his weight down. The envelope bent beneath the edge of his boot. Something inside made a faint, brittle crack. Evelyn's hand tightened against the Buick's roof. That sound reached farther into her than the tearing of her coat or the breaking of her glasses. Inside the envelope was the last photograph taken before Carter's tailoring shop closed. Samuel was not in it. He had already been ill. Evelyn stood beside Marcus, then 23, in a rented warehouse with bare walls and one folding table between them. She wore the silver thimble around her neck because Samuel had told her never to enter a serious room without remembering who she was. Behind the photograph was the original agreement, the paper Marcus had insisted they both sign. Not because Evelyn demanded ownership, because he wanted history to remember who had believed first. Evelyn looked toward the dark shape of Grant's uniform. "I asked you not to damage it." Grant lifted his chin. "And I asked you to leave. That paper has never harmed you. Neither has the door." He nodded toward the driveway exit. "But you still won't use it." A few nervous laughs came from somewhere near the entrance. They ended quickly. Evelyn turned toward the sound. She could not see who had laughed. Perhaps that made it worse. Pain moved through her shoulder in slow waves. Her vision remained blurred. Her repaired uniforms lay on the pavement. Her thread rolled in the gutter. Her groceries sat open beneath the polished entrance of a building filled with people who had never needed to count bus fare before choosing whether to eat. She stood among all of it without raising her voice, without begging, without giving Grant the anger he seemed to want. Daniel watched her, noticed the way she held herself, noticed the small silver thimble resting against her torn coat. He had seen it somewhere before. The thought came and vanished. Grant stepped off the envelope. A dark print from his boot marked the cream paper. He turned toward the Buick again. "I'm having this car towed." Evelyn's head lifted. "There are deliveries inside. Not my problem. Those supplies belong to people waiting for me. They'll keep waiting." The cruelty of the words settled across the driveway. For the first time, Claire shifted uncomfortably. Only slightly, not enough to intervene. Evelyn took a slow breath. Then she bent carefully toward the pavement. Grant reached out and caught her arm again. "I told you not to move. I am picking up my property. You'll stand where I put you." His fingers closed near the torn seam of her coat. Pain flashed across her face. Daniel finally moved without waiting for permission. He stepped around Grant, crouched near the front tire, and reached beneath the Buick. Grant turned sharply. "What are you doing?" Retrieving her envelope. "Leave it." Daniel's hand found the crushed paper. He pulled it free. The seal was smeared. One corner was torn. A dark boot mark crossed Evelyn's name. The envelope had split along the side. Inside, Daniel saw the edge of an old photograph, and beneath it, a yellowed legal document bearing the blue letterhead of a company name he recognized. Reed Medical Transit Solutions, the company that had existed before Reed Logistics Technologies. The company Marcus Reed had started more than 2 decades earlier. Daniel froze. Grant noticed. "What?" Daniel slowly stood. The damaged envelope rested in his hands. Through the torn seam, part of a signature was visible. Evelyn Carter. Below it, in younger, sharper handwriting, Marcus Reed. Daniel looked from the document to Evelyn, then to the silver thimble at her throat. Across the driveway, through the glass wall of the lobby, the giant archival photograph seemed to look back at him. The same hand, the same thimble. And suddenly Daniel understood that the woman Grant had dragged from the Buick was not trying to enter someone else's celebration. The celebration had been built around her. For a moment, the sounds beneath the glass canopy seemed to recede. The idling engines, the muted jazz drifting through the revolving doors, the soft electronic chirp of cameras focusing. All of it faded behind the two signatures visible through the torn envelope. Evelyn Carter, Marcus Reed. Daniel had seen Marcus's signature hundreds of times on security contracts, employee notices, and framed letters in company offices. The older version was more polished now, but the long upward stroke in the R had not changed. He looked through the glass wall toward the enormous photograph inside the lobby. Dark hands, a sewing table, a silver thimble. Then he looked back at Evelyn. The same thimble rested against her torn coat. Daniel's pulse quickened. "Grant," he said quietly. Grant still held Evelyn's arm. "What now?" "Let her go." The words were calm, but something in Daniel's voice had changed. Grant noticed, so did Claire. Grant's grip loosened slightly, though he did not release her. "You giving me orders?" "I'm telling you the documents are real." Claire stepped closer. "What documents?" Daniel held the envelope away from Grant. "The founding agreement for Reed Medical Transit Solutions." Claire's face showed no recognition. Daniel continued. "The company Marcus Reed started before Reed Logistics." Claire glanced toward Evelyn, then toward the people watching. Her first concern was not whether Daniel was right. It was whether anyone important had heard him. "Keep your voice down." Grant gave a dismissive laugh. "That paper could be fake. It has Marcus Reed's original signature. You a handwriting expert now?" "No." Daniel turned the agreement enough for Claire to see the letterhead. "But I know the company history." Claire took the paper from him. She scanned the first few lines. Her expression stiffened. The document described the sale of Carter's tailoring shop and a transfer of funds to the Young Logistics Company. The paper was worn at the folds, its edges softened by time. Near the bottom appeared the words, "Founding Benefactor." Beside them was Evelyn Carter's name. Claire read the line twice. Then she looked at Evelyn. For the first time that morning, uncertainty entered her face. It lasted less than a second. She folded the document back into the damaged envelope. "This proves nothing about access today." Daniel stared at her. "Her name is on the list. There are legal documents in her envelope. She's wearing the same thimble as the woman in the lobby display." Claire's voice became sharper. "That is enough." The crowd heard her. Several people turned fully toward them now, no longer pretending not to watch. Inside the lobby, Margaret Ellis stood near the revolving doors. The hospital administrator had been trying to remember where she had seen the silver thimble before. Now she knew. Not from the exhibit. From Evelyn. 8 years earlier, before Margaret had become a regional hospital executive, she had spent 3 months recovering from surgery in a small apartment near Brookside Terrace. Her insurance had covered the procedure, but not the daily help she needed afterward. Evelyn had brought meals, washed laundry, repaired 2 blouses Margaret needed for her return to work. Never accepted payment. Never asked for recognition. Margaret could see Evelyn clearly now through the glass. The torn coat, the blurred eyes searching for glasses beneath the Buick. Grant's hand still near her arm. Margaret's body moved toward the door. Then she stopped. Beside her stood a hospital owner whose foundation had pledged $20 million to a new wing. He followed her gaze. "Do you know that woman?" Margaret opened her mouth. The truthful answer was simple, yes. Instead, she looked toward Claire and the cameras. The ceremony was important. Her hospital was negotiating a major transportation contract with Reed Logistics. One wrong public step could complicate everything. "I may have seen her before," Margaret said. The donor nodded as though that settled it. Margaret remained behind the glass. Her hand tightened around the strap of her purse. Outside, Evelyn slowly moved her shoulder away from Grant's reach. He let her. Not because he had changed his mind, because the attention around them was increasing. She kept one palm against the Buick for balance. Her glasses remained under the car. Without them, the people surrounding her were reduced to expensive colors and pale shapes. But voices carried clearly. A city attorney named Thomas Keller stood near the valet desk, watching with a troubled expression. He had heard Claire's remark about Brookside Terrace. He had seen Grant pull Evelyn from the car. He knew enough law to recognize that the situation had moved beyond a misunderstanding. He leaned toward another guest. "That officer has no basis to search her vehicle." The guest whispered back, "Then say something." Thomas looked toward Grant's badge, then toward the reporters. "I don't have all the facts." "You just said—" "I said it appears improper." He stepped back. That was the choice he made. Precise language, private concern, public silence. Evelyn heard none of their whispers. She heard Grant. "You're lucky my partner decided to play detective." Daniel stepped between him and the Buick. "No, she's lucky the evidence was still there after you stepped on it." Grant's eyes hardened. "You want to be removed from this assignment?" Daniel's face tightened. He had rent due in 4 days. His mother, 71, depended on him for part of her medication costs. Continental Protective Services had already warned employees that challenging a police officer on contract could lead to immediate termination. Grant knew that. Claire knew it too. Daniel looked at Evelyn. She stood quietly among her scattered groceries and rolling spools of thread. She had already paid a price for everyone else's fear. He opened his mouth. Claire spoke first. "Mr. Price, return to the security post." Daniel did not move. "Now." The command echoed beneath the canopy. Evelyn turned toward him. Though her vision was blurred, she could make out the dark gray shape of his uniform. She understood the silence gathering around him. The job, the risk, the human instinct to survive by becoming invisible. She had seen it many times before. "Do what you believe is right," she said. Daniel swallowed. Grant smirked. "She wants you to save her." Evelyn shook her head. "No." Her voice remained gentle. "I want him to remember that whatever he chooses becomes part of him." The words reached farther than she intended. Margaret heard them through the open revolving doors. Thomas Keller heard them. The valet who had almost stepped forward heard them. So did every person holding a phone. Daniel looked down at the envelope in Claire's hands, then at the old woman. He stayed where he was. Grant turned toward Evelyn again. "You're still leaving." Claire did not correct him. Instead, she folded her arms. "We can verify the documents later." Evelyn's face lifted. "Later?" "After the ceremony. You dragged me from my car before checking my name. You searched my belongings after your own list confirmed I was invited. Now the proof is in your hand, and you want to check later." Claire's cheeks flushed. This is not the appropriate place for an argument. Evelyn looked around at the glass entrance, the cameras, the luxury vehicles, and the silent guests. "No," she said softly. "It appears this is exactly where the argument was chosen." A murmur traveled through the crowd. Grant stepped closer. "Watch your tone." Evelyn turned toward the sound of his voice. "I have watched my tone from the moment you approached me. You've been difficult since you got here. I gave you my license." Grant said nothing. "I gave you my invitation." Claire's gaze dropped. "I asked you to check the guest list." Daniel held the clipboard at his side. "I told you my name." Evelyn's hand rested over the silver thimble, and none of it mattered, because you had already decided what kind of woman I was. The silence deepened. It was no longer the uncertain silence of a crowd waiting to understand. They understood now. That made their silence worse. Grant shifted his weight. "You think you're smarter than everybody here?" "No. Evelyn's answer came without hesitation. I think I am human like everybody here. The words struck Daniel harder than any accusation could have. Grant looked toward the watching guests and gave a short, bitter laugh. Nobody here knows you. Evelyn's lips parted slightly. Pain crossed her face, quiet and deep. Not because she needed the crowd to recognize her, because she remembered all the rooms where strangers had used the same logic. No one important knows you. No one will believe you. No one will care what happens after you leave. She saw Carter's tailoring shop again, the notice posted on its window. The property manager who refused to discuss the rent increase unless Samuel was present. The banker who told her redevelopment was progress, as if progress required erasing everyone who had built the neighborhood before investors discovered it. She remembered packing fabric into boxes while men measured the walls around her. The same wound, a different building. Evelyn touched the thimble at her throat. Then she looked toward Grant's blurred outline. Would you treat me differently, she asked, if you knew someone important loved me? The question unsettled him. Not because it was loud, because it was calm. Grant stepped close enough that only those nearest could see the contempt on his face. Someone important wouldn't claim you. The sentence landed beneath the shining canopy. Margaret Ellis lowered her eyes. Thomas Keller looked away. Claire said nothing. Daniel's hand tightened around the clipboard until the edge pressed into his palm. Evelyn stood, motionless. For one heartbeat, her expression opened. The sorrow inside it was not only for herself. It was for every adult who had entered a polished building carrying valid papers and still been treated as a threat. For every worker who had been told to use the back door. For every older person whose quietness had been mistaken for weakness. For every good deed performed in neighborhoods no camera ever visited. She drew a careful breath. When she spoke, her voice had not changed. That may be the saddest thing you have said all morning. Grant's smirk faded. Evelyn continued. Because you believe a person only deserves care after somebody powerful claims them. No one moved. Even the phones seemed to lower. Daniel looked toward the glass wall again. The archival photograph, the thimble, the hands that had built the future. He made his decision. He reached for the envelope in Claire's hands. She pulled it back. What are you doing? I need to verify the document. You are not authorized. Neither was Grant authorized to destroy her property. Claire's eyes narrowed. Hand me your radio. Daniel stared at her. You heard me. His employment could end in that moment. He knew it. He looked at Evelyn once more. Then he unclipped the radio from his belt and placed it on the valet stand. The crowd shifted. Grant's face darkened. Daniel took the damaged envelope from Claire. This time she did not stop him. He carefully opened it wider. The old photograph slid partly into view. A younger Evelyn stood inside an empty warehouse beside a 23-year-old Marcus Reed. Both were smiling. Between them rested the folding table, a second-hand computer, and a hand-painted sign reading Reed Medical Transit Solutions. Around Evelyn's neck hung the silver thimble. On the back of the photograph, written in blue ink, were 7 words. Grandma, you gave me my first future. Daniel read them twice. Then he looked toward the driveway entrance. Applause had begun inside the lobby. Staff members turned toward the arrival lane. A black limousine was approaching beneath a row of fluttering company banners. Claire's face changed. Mr. Reed is here. Daniel held the photograph against the morning light. Grant looked at the limousine, then at Evelyn. He still did not understand. But in less than a minute, everyone under the glass canopy would. The black limousine rolled slowly beneath the entrance, its polished sides reflecting the glass tower, the waiting cameras, and the faded green Buick standing awkwardly among vehicles worth more than most homes in Brookside Terrace. Applause rose from inside the lobby. Staff members straightened. Reporters lifted microphones. Claire Whitman moved toward the curb as if the last 10 minutes had never happened. "Everyone back in position," she said sharply. "Now!" Grant released a breath and adjusted his uniform. Whatever concern had flickered across his face disappeared behind professional posture. He pointed toward Evelyn. "Keep her out of the lane." Daniel stared at him. "You still don't understand what you're looking at." Grant glanced at the photograph in Daniel's hand. "I understand an elderly woman showed up with old paperwork and caused a security delay." "She didn't cause this." "Then who did?" Daniel looked at Grant's polished boot, the scattered groceries, the broken glasses beneath the Buick, and the torn sleeve hanging from Evelyn's shoulder. "You did." Grant stepped close. "Careful." Daniel did not step back. The limousine stopped 30 feet away. Before the rear door opened, Claire reached for the damaged envelope. "Give that to me." Daniel turned slightly, keeping it out of reach. "No." Her face hardened. "You are no longer part of this assignment." "Then you have no reason to order me around. I can make sure you never work another corporate event in this city." Daniel looked at the words on the back of the photograph again. "Grandma, you gave me my first future." He thought about his mother, who had spent 30 years cleaning offices where executives never learned her name. He thought about every time he had swallowed an objection, because the person doing wrong held more authority than he did. Then he looked toward Evelyn. She stood without her glasses, unable to clearly see the people who had judged her. Yet she was the only person beneath the canopy who appeared fully certain of who she was. Daniel slipped the photograph back into the envelope. "Maybe I shouldn't work events like this," he said. Claire's lips parted. Before she could answer, the rear door of the limousine opened. A driver stepped out first, followed by two Reed Logistics executives. Behind them came Marcus Reed. At 45, Marcus carried the kind of presence that changed a room before he spoke. His charcoal suit was simple but perfectly tailored. A dark blue tie matched the company banners hanging above the entrance. He greeted the governor's transportation advisor with a brief handshake, then turned toward the cameras. A reporter called his name. Another asked about the center's new medical distribution system. Marcus smiled and started toward the building. Then he saw the crowd gathered around the Buick. His steps slowed. At first, all he could make out was the security officer standing beside an older woman. Then the woman turned slightly. The silver thimble caught the light. Marcus stopped. The executives behind him nearly walked into one another. His smile vanished. For a second, he looked as though someone had removed the ground beneath his feet. "Mr. Reed?" one of his assistants asked. Marcus did not answer. His eyes moved over the scene, the torn sleeve, the groceries on the pavement, the sewing thread caught near the curb, the cream envelope in Daniel's hand, the single shoe bent beneath the open driver's door. Then he saw Grant's fingers close around Evelyn's upper arm again. Grant had turned her toward the sidewalk, intending to clear the arrival lane before Marcus reached them. "Move over there." Evelyn pulled gently against his grip. "Please let go of me." "Not until you stop resisting." "I am not resisting." Marcus began walking. Fast. Claire stepped forward to intercept him. "Mr. Reed, welcome. We had a minor access issue, but security has it under control." Marcus passed her without looking. Claire turned and hurried after him. "It is being handled." His pace increased. The applause inside the lobby faded unevenly as people realized he was not approaching the stage. He was heading toward the Buick. Grant saw him coming and straightened. "Mr. Reed." Marcus did not respond. Grant shifted into explanation. "This woman entered the restricted lane with questionable documentation. She refused repeated instructions to leave, so we—" Marcus's gaze dropped to Grant's hand. Still gripping Evelyn, his voice cut across the silent entrance with a force that froze every person beneath the glass canopy. "Get your hands off my grandma!" Grant's fingers opened. Evelyn's arm fell free. No one breathed. Marcus crossed the final distance between them. The cameras that had been pointed toward the stage turned as one. Shutters clicked rapidly. Claire stopped several feet behind him, her face drained of color. Grant looked from Marcus to Evelyn, then back again. "Your grandma?" Marcus ignored him. He stepped in front of Evelyn and gently touched both her shoulders, careful not to press the torn side of her coat. "Grandma." His voice changed completely. The authority vanished from it. What remained was fear. "Are you hurt?" Evelyn lifted her face toward the sound. Without her glasses, she could not clearly see him, but she knew his voice instantly. "Marcus." He looked down at her bruised arm. The redness where Grant had held her was already darkening beneath the skin. "What happened?" "I am all right." "No, you're not." Marcus looked beneath the Buick. "Where are your glasses?" "They fell." Daniel crouched and reached under the car. He recovered the bent frames carefully. One lens was cracked, and the other had slipped partly out. Marcus accepted them, his jaw tightened. "Who did this?" Grant stepped forward. "Sir, there has been a misunderstanding." Marcus turned. The look on his face stopped Grant before he could say anything else. "A misunderstanding." Grant swallowed. She would not comply with security instructions. Evelyn touched Marcus's sleeve. "Do not begin with anger." He looked back at her. "Grandma, he put his hands on you." "I know. He damaged your property." "I know. He humiliated you in front of all these people." Her gaze moved toward the blurred crowd. "I know that too." Marcus's chest rose with a slow, controlled breath. Behind him, several executives stared at the pavement. Margaret Ellis stood just inside the entrance, tears gathering in her eyes. Thomas Keller, the city attorney, lowered his phone. Not one of them had spoken before Marcus arrived. Now all of them appeared ready to apologize. Evelyn heard the shift in their breathing, the shuffle of expensive shoes moving closer, the sudden concern in voices that had been silent while Grant dragged her from the car. She understood exactly what had changed. Not the facts, only her relationship to power. Marcus looked at Daniel. "What is in your hand?" Daniel offered him the envelope. It fell under the car. Officer Miller stepped on it. Grant's face tightened. "I did not know what it contained." Marcus took the envelope. The boot print crossed his grandmother's name. He opened the torn side and removed the photograph. For several seconds, he said nothing. The young man in the picture looked almost nothing like the billionaire standing under the canopy now. His shirt sleeves were rolled up. His tie was borrowed and too wide. The warehouse behind him had bare concrete floors and exposed pipes. Evelyn stood beside him wearing a simple dress and the silver thimble. Marcus's thumb moved across the photograph. "You brought this?" "It was meant for the exhibit." He looked at the agreement. The paper shook slightly in his hand. Claire stepped forward. "Mr. Reed, we had no way of knowing." Daniel turned toward her. Her name was on the restricted list. Claire stopped. Marcus looked up. "What?" Daniel lifted the clipboard. "Mrs. Carter was listed as a personal arrival with instructions not to redirect her." Marcus's eyes moved to Claire. She recovered quickly. There was no photograph attached. Given the condition of the vehicle and the unusual circumstances, Officer Miller believed. "The condition of the vehicle?" Claire realized the mistake too late. Marcus's voice remained quiet. "Say that again." "I only meant the arrival did not match the expected profile." "What profile?" Claire glanced toward the cameras. "Mr. Reed, perhaps we should discuss this privately." Evelyn spoke before Marcus could answer. "No." Every face turned toward her. She held out one hand. Marcus placed the damaged envelope into it. Evelyn pressed it against her coat. "This did not happen privately." Claire's mouth tightened. Evelyn continued. My invitation was questioned in public. My belongings were thrown into the road in public. My arm was grabbed in public. The phones remained raised. So the truth will not be hidden in a private office. Marcus looked at her with quiet pride. Grant shifted nervously. Ma'am, I apologize if you felt... Evelyn turned toward his voice. I did not feel my glasses break. Grant fell silent. I heard them. She touched the torn seam of her coat. I did not feel you search my car. Her hand moved toward the groceries on the pavement. I watched you do it. Then she lifted the envelope. And I did not imagine your boot on this. Grant's face flushed. Marcus's legal counsel, Rebecca Sloan, emerged from the limousine. At 52, she had represented Reed Logistics through acquisitions, federal reviews, and labor negotiations. One look at Marcus's expression told her this was more serious than an event disruption. She approached Daniel. Was any of this recorded? Daniel looked around. At least 20 phones, the exterior security cameras too. Rebecca nodded once. Secure all company footage immediately. No deletions, no edits. Claire spoke quickly. Rebecca, let's not overreact before we establish context. Rebecca looked at the scattered contents of the Buick. I believe the context is visible. Grant's hand moved toward his radio. Marcus noticed. Do not call anyone to remove her. I was going to notify my supervisor. Good. Marcus's voice turned cold. Tell your supervisor to come here. Grant hesitated. Marcus stepped closer. Now, Grant lifted the radio. His voice lacked the confidence it had carried minutes earlier. Control, send Captain Lewis to the front entrance. Static answered. Claire glanced toward the stage inside. Hundreds of guests were waiting. The ceremony's schedule had already slipped. She lowered her voice. Mr. Reed, the dedication begins in 6 minutes. Marcus turned toward her. The dedication began the moment my grandmother arrived. He looked at this covered plaque through the glass doors, then at Evelyn. We are changing the program. Claire's face tightened with alarm. Changing it how? Marcus gently offered Evelyn his arm. We are going inside. Evelyn did not take it immediately. She looked toward the pavement. My things. The command in Marcus's face softened. He bent to pick up a spool of blue thread. Daniel gathered the uniforms. Rebecca lifted the pharmacy bag. One by one, Reed Logistics executives began collecting the groceries they had stepped around moments earlier. Margaret Ellis finally came through the doors. Evelyn. Evelyn recognized her voice. Margaret. The hospital administrator stopped a few feet away, shame visible across her face. I saw what was happening. Evelyn waited. Margaret's eyes filled. I should have come outside. Yes, Evelyn said quietly. You should have. The honesty struck harder than anger. Margaret lowered her head and picked up the final can of soup from beside the curb. The crowd watched as powerful people carried the belongings they had allowed Grant to scatter. Marcus found Evelyn's bent shoe near the car door. He knelt and placed it carefully before her. She slid her foot inside. Then she accepted his arm. As they approached the glass entrance, every person moved aside. Only minutes earlier, the same crowd had watched her stand alone. Now they created a clear path. Evelyn paused before stepping through the doors. She turned back toward Grant, Claire, and the silent guests. Her damaged envelope rested against her heart. You know my name now, she said. No one answered. But that is not the same as knowing my worth. Then she entered the building beside Marcus. Behind them, the covered bronze plaque waited beneath the white lights. And before the morning ended, every person in the Halston Innovation Center would learn whose name was carved beneath the cloth. The lobby had been arranged for celebration. Rows of white chairs faced a raised stage beneath the suspended silver sculpture. Tall floral arrangements stood beside transparent podiums. Screens displayed moving maps of emergency routes connecting hospitals, warehouses, and rural communities across the Southeast. Now the room felt less like a ceremony hall and more like a courtroom waiting for testimony. Guests returned to their seats slowly. No one resumed the easy conversations that had filled the building earlier. Expensive shoes crossed the marble in subdued steps. Champagne glasses remained untouched on silver trays. Reporters whispered into phones while camera operators redirected their lenses from the company logo toward Evelyn Carter. Marcus guided her to a chair near the stage. Rebecca Sloan brought a glass of water. "Would you like a doctor to examine your shoulder?" Evelyn moved her arm carefully. "It hurts, but I don't believe anything is broken. We should still have someone look at it. After." Marcus crouched beside her. "Grandma, there does not have to be an after. We can end this event now." Evelyn turned toward him through the cracked lens of her damaged glasses. "No." He studied her face. "They should not get a celebration after what happened." This was never their celebration. Her hand rested over the cream envelope. "It was meant to tell the truth about where you came from." Marcus glanced toward the covered plaque. "That truth can wait. It has waited 22 years. The firmness in her voice ended the argument. Marcus rose. Across the lobby, Claire stood beside the event staff, speaking urgently into her headset. Grant remained near the entrance with Captain Robert Lewis, a senior representative from the police department. Daniel stood several feet away without his company radio, still holding the clipboard that had confirmed Evelyn's name from the beginning. The crowd watched each group carefully. Everyone could feel consequences gathering. Marcus walked to the podium. The prepared speech rested on the transparent surface in front of him. 12 pages printed on thick paper. It included financial projections, hospital partnerships, regional employment numbers, and praise for elected officials seated in the front row. He closed the folder without reading a word. The room settled into silence. "My communications team prepared remarks for this morning," he began. "They expected me to talk about innovation." His voice carried evenly through the speakers. "They expected me to explain how this building will move medical supplies faster, connect hospitals more efficiently, and create hundreds of jobs." He looked toward Evelyn. "Those things matter." Then his gaze moved across the audience. "But they are not the most important truth in this room." On the screens behind him, the moving maps disappeared. A black and white photograph replaced them. A 23-year-old Marcus stood inside a nearly empty warehouse beside Evelyn, who was 52 at the time. Between them sat a second-hand computer, a folding table, and a hand-painted company sign. A murmur passed through the hall. Marcus turned toward the image. 22 years ago, I had an idea and almost nothing else." He faced the audience again. "No investors, no family connections in banking, no office worth showing anyone. I had been rejected by every institution I approached." The photograph changed. A narrow brick storefront appeared on the screen. Blue trim around the windows. Fabric displayed behind the glass. Carter's tailoring shop painted above the door. "This was my grandmother's business." Evelyn lowered her eyes. For a moment, she could almost hear Samuel unlocking the front door before sunrise. Marcus continued. "She built it with my grandfather, Samuel Carter. They spent nearly 30 years repairing uniforms, making suits, altering dresses, and serving people who were often ignored by larger businesses." The screen displayed Samuel at 63, standing beside Evelyn with a measuring tape around his neck. Every person shown was an adult. Every life represented had carried responsibilities, losses, and sacrifices long before the company in the room existed. Then redevelopment came to Brookside Terrace. Marcus's voice hardened slightly. Property values rose, taxes rose. Longtime businesses were treated as obstacles to progress. Banks that had accepted my grandmother's deposits for decades would not extend the credit she needed to remain in place. Claire shifted near the wall. The investors seated closest to the stage became very still. She lost the building. The next image showed an empty storefront with paper covering the windows. At the same time, I was trying to create a medical delivery company. I believed hospitals could coordinate emergency shipments through a single digital network. People called the idea too ambitious. Some called me inexperienced. Others looked at me, looked at the neighborhood I came from, and never listened long enough to understand the plan. Marcus paused. My grandmother had every reason to keep whatever money remained from the sale of her shop. Evelyn watched him quietly. Instead, she gave it to me. The room remained silent. Not part of it. Marcus's voice grew softer. So, all of it. A number appeared on the screen beside an image of the original handwritten agreement. It was not enormous by modern corporate standards, but it represented nearly everything Evelyn and Samuel had spent their adult lives building. That money paid the warehouse deposit. It bought the first computer. It covered fuel for our first delivery contract. It gave me enough time to prove the idea could work. Marcus lifted the damaged cream envelope from the podium. The original agreement was inside this envelope this morning. Cameras zoomed toward the dark boot print crossing Evelyn's name. It was meant to become part of the permanent exhibit in this building. He looked toward Grant. Instead, it was crushed under the boot of a man who decided its owner did not belong here. Grant's face reddened. Captain Lewis said something quietly to him, but Grant did not respond. Marcus continued. This morning, my grandmother arrived in the car she has driven for years. She wore a coat she has cared for longer than some people care for their employees. She brought groceries, repaired uniforms, and medication for adults in her neighborhood. He gestured toward the items now arranged carefully beside Evelyn's chair. Those things were treated as proof that she lacked status. Several people lowered their eyes. They were actually proof of who she has always been. Marcus looked toward the hospital administrator near the entrance. Margaret Ellis. Margaret stiffened. Would you stand, please? She rose slowly. Marcus did not humiliate her. He simply asked, Do you know my grandmother? Margaret looked toward Evelyn. Yes. How? Her voice trembled. She helped me after surgery 8 years ago. She brought food and did laundry when I could not manage on my own. She repaired my work clothes so I could return to the hospital. Did she ask for payment? No. Did she tell you she helped finance Reed Logistics? No. Did she ask you to tell anyone? Margaret's eyes filled. No. Marcus nodded. You saw her outside this morning. It was not a question. Margaret looked down. Yes. And you remained inside. Yes. Her answer came almost as a whisper. The room absorbed it. Marcus turned back toward the audience. My grandmother's dignity did not appear when I called her grandma. He moved away from the podium and stood beside Evelyn. It was present when she repaired a stranger's uniform without charge. Evelyn looked up at him. It was present when she carried groceries for an injured neighbor. His voice thickened. It was present when she sold the business she loved, so a young black man could build a future no bank was willing to imagine. He extended his hand. Evelyn placed hers inside it. Marcus helped her rise. The audience stood instinctively. Evelyn heard chairs moving across marble. She felt the sudden attention surrounding her. She raised one hand. Please sit down. The room obeyed. Marcus guided her to the covered plaque. Evelyn faced the crowd. Her damaged glasses sat unevenly on her nose. Her coat remained torn. She had refused every suggestion to replace either before stepping onto the stage. I appreciate what my grandson has said. Her voice was softer than his, but the room leaned closer to hear it. I am proud of him. Marcus lowered his eyes. But I need everyone here to understand something. She touched the envelope. My worth did not begin when you learned his name for me. No one moved. When I stood outside, I had the same history I have now. Her gaze passed over Claire, Grant, Margaret, and the silent guests. I had helped the same people, made the same sacrifices, carried the same love in my heart. She paused. The only thing that changed was what you learned about my connection to a powerful man. The sentence settled heavily across the lobby. If respect arrives only after wealth is revealed, it is not respect. Evelyn turned toward the covered plaque. Marcus placed the cord in her hand. Together they pulled. The white cloth fell away. Bronze letters caught the light. The Evelyn Carter Innovation Hall. Beneath the name, a smaller inscription read, "In honor of the woman who believed before anyone invested." A sound moved through the room. Not applause at first, a collective breath. Then people rose slowly. The applause began near the back and spread forward until it filled the glass lobby. Evelyn did not smile immediately. She looked at the plaque, at her name carved into a building she had entered only after being dragged from her car. Marcus stood beside her, tears bright in his eyes. Finally, she took his hand. The applause grew louder. Near the entrance, Daniel did not clap. He was staring at his clipboard. Attached behind the restricted guest list was a sealed internal incident summary from Continental Protective Services. He had seen the file before but had never been permitted to read it. Now the fastening clip had broken loose. The first page contained Grant Miller's name. Below it was a list of dates. 11 of them. 11 complaints. 11 people who had described being searched, removed, threatened, or publicly humiliated at other corporate properties. Daniel looked toward Evelyn on the stage, then toward Grant. The truth revealed that mourning was larger than one damaged invitation, and before the applause ended, Daniel stepped into the center aisle carrying evidence that could bring down more than a single officer. At first, only a few people noticed him. The room was still standing beneath the bronze plaque, cameras aimed toward Evelyn and Marcus, while the last wave of applause rolled through the glass lobby. Daniel moved slowly between the rows of white chairs, the loosened incident packet held against his chest. His face had changed. The uncertainty was gone. What remained was fear mixed with resolve. Marcus saw him first. He raised one hand, and the applause began to fade. Daniel stopped near the stage. "Mr. Reed, there is something else you need to see." Claire Whitman stepped out from beside the event staff. "Sir, this is neither the time nor the place." Daniel looked at her. "That is what people say when they need more time to hide something." A nervous silence moved across the room. Claire's jaw tightened. "You were removed from duty." "Yes." "Then leave the premises." Marcus stepped between them. "He stays." Claire's expression changed instantly. "Marcus, I am trying to protect the integrity of the event." The integrity of the event ended in the driveway. He extended his hand toward Daniel. "What do you have?" Daniel climbed the 2 steps to the stage and passed him the packet. The outer page carried the logo of Continental Protective Services, the private company responsible for staffing security at several Reed Logistics properties. A red stamp crossed the top, Internal Review, Restricted. Below it appeared Grant Miller's name. Marcus read the first page, then the second. His expression hardened. Rebecca Sloan joined him at the podium. "What is it?" Marcus handed her the packet. She scanned the dates, 11 separate complaints filed over 4 years. The first came from a 58-year-old delivery driver removed from a medical office after Grant accused him of stealing supplies from his own truck. The second came from a 64-year-old black cleaner detained in a hotel service corridor while carrying an employee badge. Another involved a 47-year-old restaurant worker forced into the rain because Grant decided his uniform looked suspicious. There were complaints from transit passengers, warehouse employees, visiting nurses, and older residents of apartment buildings where Grant had worked private assignments. Different locations, different witnesses. The same language repeated again and again. Aggressive questioning, humiliating treatment, unnecessary searches, threats of arrest, property damaged, no evidence found. Rebecca looked up. "Were these investigated?" Daniel answered. "Not properly." Grant took a step toward the stage. "Those complaints were closed." Rebecca turned toward him. "Why?" "Because they were unproven." Daniel shook his head. "Some had video." Grant's face darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I saw." Daniel faced the audience. His voice was not loud, but the microphones near the podium caught every word. "I worked 3 of those assignments." The room went still. Grant stared at him. Claire's eyes narrowed. Daniel continued. At the Central Avenue Hotel, Grant detained a cleaner named Anthony Parker for 20 minutes because he used the guest elevator when the service elevator stopped working. Grant gave a dismissive laugh. He ignored instructions. He had a supervisor's written permission. Daniel's voice shook slightly. "I saw it." Rebecca asked, "Did you report that?" Daniel looked down. "No." The answer seemed to cost him something. "I told myself Grant was the police officer, and I was only contract security. I told myself the company would review the complaint. I told myself keeping my job mattered because my mother depended on me." Evelyn listened from beside the plaque. Daniel turned toward her. "Every excuse sounded reasonable while I was making it." He swallowed. "But none of them helped the people standing alone." Grant's voice cut through the room. "This is pathetic. You're trying to save yourself." Daniel looked at him. "No." He held Grant's gaze. "I am admitting I helped you by staying quiet." That sentence traveled through the audience like a cold draft. Margaret Ellis lowered her head again. Thomas Keller shifted in his seat. The people who had watched Evelyn outside understood that Daniel was not speaking only about himself. Rebecca separated several pages from the packet. "Who approved the closures?" Daniel pointed toward a name near the bottom. "Regional Director Howard Bell." Claire stepped closer. "Continental Protective Services is an independent contractor. Reed Logistics does not control its internal reviews." Marcus looked at her. "Did you know about the complaints?" "No." Daniel answered before she could continue. She knew there had been concerns. Claire's eyes snapped toward him. "Be very careful." Daniel reached into the packet and removed a printed email. It had been sent 6 months earlier from Claire to Howard Bell. The subject line read, "Guest Profile Enforcement." Rebecca read it silently, then aloud. "Shh. We need officers willing to act before visual inconsistencies become public disruptions. Staff should prioritize appearance, vehicle condition, and familiarity with premium environments when assessing access." The words hung in the lobby. Claire's face lost color. "That email is being misinterpreted." Marcus's voice was quiet. "How should we interpret it?" "It referred to professional standards." "What standards?" "Appropriate presentation." "For whom?" Claire looked toward the cameras. "This is not a productive discussion." Evelyn spoke from beside the plaque. "It is productive for the people those words were used against." Claire turned. "Mrs. Carter, I never mentioned race or class." "No." Evelyn touched the torn edge of her coat. "You did not need to." The room remained silent. "You created a rule that could be applied only after someone looked at a person and decided they did not fit." Claire's mouth tightened. "Every high-level event requires judgment." "Judgment is not the same as prejudice." Claire looked toward Marcus. "You cannot seriously believe I intended what happened outside." Marcus held up the email. "You created a culture where Grant believed he was doing exactly what you wanted." Captain Robert Lewis, who had remained near the entrance, walked toward Grant. "Officer Miller." I need your badge and duty weapon pending investigation. Grant turned sharply. What? You heard me. I am working an approved off-duty detail. That approval has been suspended. Grant looked around the room as though expecting support. No one offered it. Captain, this is political theater. Lewis held out his hand. Badge and weapon. Grant's face reddened. Because some old woman happens to know a billionaire? Evelyn's expression did not change. Marcus stepped down from the stage. That sentence is the reason this cannot be treated as a misunderstanding. Grant realized too late what he had said. The cameras had captured it. Every microphone had captured it. Captain Lewis repeated the command. Now. Grant unclipped his badge. The metal seemed smaller in his hand than it had outside. He placed it in the captain's palm. Then he removed his duty weapon and surrendered it carefully. The room watched without applause. There was no celebration in the moment. Only consequence. 2 uniformed officers escorted Grant through the same glass doors where he had dragged Evelyn from her Buick. His shoulders remained rigid until he reached the driveway. Then they seemed to collapse. Claire turned toward the event staff. This ceremony is over. No, Evelyn said. Claire stopped. Evelyn moved slowly toward the podium. Marcus offered his arm, but she shook her head. She wanted to stand on her own. The cracked lens of her glasses caught the white stage light. This part is not over, her voice carried gently through the room. These 11 complaints belong to 11 adults who were ignored before anyone knew my name. Rebecca nodded. We will contact every complainant. Not your company lawyers alone. Evelyn looked toward Marcus. I want an independent investigation. Marcus answered immediately. You have it. I want those people heard before anyone offers me a settlement. You have my word. Claire stared at them. Marcus, there are contractual obligations. He turned toward her. You are relieved of event authority effective immediately. Her face went still. On what basis? On the basis of your email, your conduct today, and your refusal to act after the guest list confirmed my grandmother belonged here. Claire looked toward the audience. The donors she had greeted by name avoided her eyes. The staff members she had ordered around lowered their headsets. The lobby that had once moved according to her voice no longer responded to it. Rebecca approached. Ms. Whitman, please surrender your company badge and electronic access card. Claire hesitated, then unclipped the badge from her jacket. Her fingers trembled as she placed it on the podium. The sound was small, plastic against glass. Yet everyone heard it. Outside, dark clouds had begun gathering over the city. The bright reflections on the Halston Center's facade faded to gray. Within an hour, Reed Logistics announced an independent review led by attorney Rachel Foster, a 51-year-old civil rights and corporate accountability specialist based in Atlanta. By noon, the company suspended its contract with Continental Protective Services. By evening, 3 hospital systems requested copies of the complaint records. The next morning, 2 major hotel groups canceled their security agreements. Then the first former complainant agreed to speak publicly. Anthony Parker stood outside the Central Avenue Hotel in a work jacket Evelyn might once have repaired. He looked directly into a television camera and described the afternoon Grant had treated him like a criminal in the building where he had worked for 14 years. Others followed, a restaurant manager, a retired transit employee, a warehouse driver, an elderly apartment resident. One by one, voices once buried in locked cabinets entered the light. 3 days after the ceremony, Rachel Foster arrived at Carter's Corner. Rain darkened the sidewalks of Brookside Terrace. Bus brakes hissed at the corner. Warm yellow light shone through the tailoring shop windows. Rachel found Evelyn seated behind her sewing machine, repairing the torn sleeve of the same coat she had worn to Halston. You could replace that, Rachel said. Evelyn guided the fabric beneath the needle. I could. Then why repair it? Evelyn looked down at the seam. Because damage should not always get the final word. Rachel placed a thick case file on the counter. 11 complaints may only be the beginning. Evelyn's hands stopped. How many more? We don't know yet. Outside, headlights moved through the rain. Across the street, Linda Brooks stood beneath an umbrella, watching 2 news vans pull toward Carter's Corner. Evelyn looked at the file, then at the repaired sleeve beneath her hands. The truth had already exposed Grant. Now it was moving toward everyone who had protected him. Rain settled over Charlotte in a steady rhythm, washing the glass towers downtown, while Brookside Terrace glowed beneath the warm yellow lights of corner stores and apartment windows. Inside Carter's Corner, the sewing machine rested quietly. For the first time in years, Evelyn had left it untouched for an entire afternoon. Not because there was no work. There was always work. A coat needing a new sleeve, a pair of work pants waiting for stronger stitching, a church jacket missing 2 buttons. Life continued asking ordinary things from ordinary people. But the thick investigation file Rachel Foster had carried into the shop had changed the rhythm of the day. Rachel sat across from Evelyn at the small wooden table near the front window. She opened the first section of documents. We've confirmed 11 formal complaints. Evelyn nodded slowly. And unofficial reports? Rachel sighed. More. How many? We don't know yet. She turned another page. Some people never filed anything. Why? Rachel looked toward the rain outside. The same reason many never do. They thought no one would listen. Rachel met Evelyn's eyes. Until now. Evelyn folded her hands. I wish they hadn't needed my story. Rachel understood immediately. You wish theirs had been enough. Yes. Silence settled gently between them. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Across the room, Marcus stood beside the old front window, watching reporters gather across the street. Satellite vans had begun appearing before sunrise. Every major network wanted an interview. Every producer wanted exclusive footage inside Carter's Corner. Marcus turned back. We can ask them to leave. Evelyn smiled faintly. They're doing their jobs. They're disturbing yours. She looked around the small shop. Spools of thread, shelves of folded fabric, Samuel's framed photograph. Everything felt exactly as it had before the ceremony. That steadied her. I've never wanted attention. Marcus walked closer. I know. I wanted people treated fairly before anyone knew my name. He sat beside her. And now they do. She looked at the investigation file. Then let's make sure they remember the right reason. Rachel closed the folder. That's exactly why I'm here. She removed another document. This is the proposed settlement. Marcus frowned. So soon? Rachel nodded. Continental Protective Services wants to resolve your claims privately. She slid the paper across the table. The offer contained more money than Carter's Corner had earned in decades. Medical costs, emotional damages, property replacement, confidentiality, a carefully worded public apology. Marcus barely glanced at the amount. No. Rachel looked toward Evelyn. This is entirely your decision. Evelyn read every page carefully, then placed the papers back on the table. No. Rachel wasn't surprised. May I ask why? Evelyn folded the agreement. They're trying to purchase silence. Marcus smiled softly. That sounds like you. She looked toward him. I don't need compensation before the truth. Rachel nodded. What would you accept? Evelyn answered without hesitation. Every person who filed one of those complaints deserves to be contacted. Rachel wrote the sentence down. They deserve independent legal review. Another note. No company lawyer should decide whose suffering mattered. Rachel continued writing. I want every investigation reopened. She paused. And? Evelyn looked toward the rain. I don't want revenge. Marcus remained quiet. Rachel asked gently, What do you want? Evelyn's answer came slowly. I want the next person in an old car to be greeted before they're judged. No one spoke. The simplicity of the request filled the room. Marcus finally broke the silence. We'll do more than that. Rachel looked at him. Reed Logistics is terminating every remaining contract with Continental Protective Services effective today. Evelyn nodded once. Good. We're also creating new intervention requirements. Rachel smiled. I was hoping you'd say that, Marcus continued. If an employee watches abuse and does nothing, silence becomes a disciplinary issue. Evelyn glanced toward him. Not punishment. He looked surprised. She continued. Education. Rachel leaned forward. Explain. Evelyn touched the repaired sleeve of her coat. People learn courage the same way they learn kindness. By practicing it. Marcus understood. No one should lose a career for admitting they failed once. Rachel nodded. But they should lose it if they refuse to learn. Evelyn smiled. Exactly. A knock sounded at the door. Marcus stood. Outside stood Daniel Price. He looked exhausted. His security uniform was gone. Instead, he wore jeans and a simple navy jacket. He held a cardboard box. Marcus opened the door. Daniel, I hope I'm not interrupting. You aren't. Daniel stepped inside. The familiar smell of fabric and steam seemed to calm him immediately. He looked around quietly. So this is Carter's Corner. Evelyn smiled. It has been for many years. Daniel placed the box on the counter. I cleaned out my locker. Inside lay his security badge, company manuals, a coffee mug, a framed photograph of his mother. They fired you? Daniel nodded. This morning. Marcus frowned. For cooperating? They said I violated internal policy. Rachel made another note. They've just helped our case. Daniel gave a tired laugh. I figured. He looked toward Evelyn. I wanted to apologize. She waited. Not because I finally spoke. His voice lowered. Because I stayed silent before that. The room remained still. I watched Grant do things that didn't feel right. He looked at his hands. I always found a reason. Need the paycheck, need the insurance, need to help my mother, need somebody else to step in first. He shook his head. Those reasons sound smaller every day. Evelyn stood. She walked towards him slowly. Her shoulder still hurt. Her glasses had been temporarily repaired, though the cracked lens remained. She stopped only an arm's length away. You cannot change yesterday. Daniel nodded. I know. But you can decide who tomorrow remembers you to be. His eyes filled. I'd like tomorrow to remember me better. She extended her hand. Daniel took it. Then begin there. Marcus watched quietly. Rachel watched too. No speeches, no dramatic forgiveness. Only an elderly woman choosing restoration over resentment. Outside, reporters noticed Daniel entering the shop. Within minutes, social media filled with speculation. Former security officer meets billionaire's grandmother. Private deal? Secret settlement? No one knew what had actually happened inside. The truth was much simpler. A woman had given a frightened man permission to become better than his worst decision. The following morning, Reed Logistics held a press conference. This time it took place not beneath polished chandeliers, but inside a community hall in Brookside Terrace. Marcus stood beside Evelyn. Rachel stood nearby. No luxury backdrop, no corporate slogans. Only folding chairs and neighbors who had known Evelyn for years. Marcus announced 3 immediate reforms. Every contracted security company would undergo independent review. Every complaint involving public treatment would receive outside oversight. Every employee would receive mandatory intervention training built around one principle. Silence protects abuse. Action protects people. Then Marcus stepped aside. He offered Evelyn the microphone. She accepted it reluctantly. I've been asked many times whether I forgive Officer Grant Miller. The room became quiet. I hope one day he understands the harm he caused, she paused. But forgiveness does not cancel accountability. Several reporters nodded while writing. If someone breaks a window, replacing the glass matters. She looked around the room. If someone breaks trust, repairing it matters even more. She smiled gently. I don't want anyone ruined simply because they failed. Her eyes moved toward Daniel seated in the second row. I want people changed because they finally told the truth. The audience applauded softly, not loudly, respectfully. That afternoon, official notices arrived. Grant Miller's police commission had been revoked, pending the outcome of criminal and administrative proceedings. His private security license was suspended immediately. Claire Whitman's employment with Reed Logistics ended effective that day. Several corporate clients canceled contracts with Continental Protective Services before sunset. The consequences spread farther than any lawsuit could have purchased. Late that evening, Marcus returned to Carter's Corner carrying dinner from a neighborhood diner. He found Evelyn back at her sewing machine. You should be resting. She smiled without looking up. I've rested enough. He laughed quietly. You really can't stop helping people. She threaded a fresh needle. I don't know how. Marcus watched the machine begin humming again. Outside, rain had finally stopped. Warm light spilled from the shop windows onto the wet sidewalk. People passing by waved. Evelyn waved back. The attention surrounding her had changed, but she hadn't. Marcus looked at the silver thimble resting against her neck. So much changed because of one morning. Evelyn continued sewing. No, she smiled. It changed because people finally stopped pretending they couldn't see. Outside, another television van pulled slowly to the curb. Inside Rachel Foster's growing investigation file, 11 complaints had already become 19, and she had a feeling the hardest truths had not yet been uncovered. The 19th report came from a 66-year-old retired transit mechanic named Leonard Harris. He had never filed anything officially. 2 years earlier, Grant Miller had stopped him outside a luxury apartment building where Leonard was waiting to deliver his sister's spare keys. Grant questioned him, searched his coat, and held him against a brick wall while residents passed through the lobby without slowing down. Leonard had gone home with no charges and no paperwork, only humiliation. When Rachel asked why he had remained silent, he gave the same answer she had heard from several others. Who was going to believe me? That question followed Rachel through every interview. It appeared in the pauses between sentences, in hands tightening around coffee cups, and in the careful way grown adults described being made to feel small by someone wearing authority. Some had complained and been ignored. Others had never tried. All of them had learned the same lesson long before Evelyn arrived at Halston. Truth without influence could disappear quietly. Rachel refused to let that happen again. She rented a conference room inside the Brookside Terrace Community Hall and invited every known complainant to speak with independent attorneys. No company representatives attended. No security executives sat behind polished tables. The room held folding chairs, paper cups of coffee, and a row of windows overlooking the bus stop. Evelyn attended the first meeting. She sat near the back. She did not introduce herself as Marcus Reed's grandmother. She introduced herself as Evelyn Carter from Carter's Corner. One by one, the complainants spoke. Anthony Parker described being questioned in the hotel where he had worked for 14 years. Leonard told them about the apartment wall. A restaurant manager named Celeste Turner explained how Grant had forced her into an alley after deciding her employee entrance card was fake. A visiting nurse named Rebecca Jones recalled standing in freezing rain while Grant called her supervisor to verify she was really medical staff. Each story was different. The injury was the same. They had been judged before they spoke. When the meeting ended, several people approached Evelyn. Some thanked her. She shook her head each time. "You should not have needed me." Leonard looked at her for a long moment. "But we did." The truth of that answer hurt more than any bruise. Outside, evening buses pulled away from the curb with long sighs of air. Neon from the pharmacy sign painted the wet sidewalk red and blue. Evelyn stood beneath the community hall awning, while Marcus waited beside the repaired Buick. "You all right?" he asked. She looked through the rain toward the people leaving the meeting. "I will be." Marcus opened the passenger door. Evelyn did not get in. "Do you remember when you were starting the company?" He smiled faintly. "I remember being terrified every day. You asked me what would happen if you failed. I remember. I told you failure was not losing money." Marcus looked at her. "You said failure was becoming the kind of man who forgot why he started." Evelyn nodded. "Do not let this company forget." "I won't. That promise is not enough." The words were gentle, but they carried weight. "What do you need me to do?" "Build something that does not depend on you being a good man forever." Marcus understood. Good intentions could change. Leadership could change. Policies had to survive both. The next morning, Reed Logistics Board met in an emergency session. The conference room occupied the 38th floor of the company's headquarters. Charlotte stretched below the windows in silver towers and ribbons of traffic. Screens displayed reports from Rachel's investigation, financial losses from canceled security contracts, and proposed reforms. Several directors wanted a quick resolution. One suggested paying every verified claimant and issuing a strong public statement. Another warned that continued investigation could expose the company to lawsuits. Marcus listened without interrupting. Then he placed Evelyn's damaged invitation in the center of the table. The boot print remained visible across her name. "This is what a quick resolution looks like," he said. No one answered. "Paper over the damage. Replace the envelope. Pretend the stain is gone." He looked around the table. "My grandmother was recognized because I arrived." His voice remained calm. "The next person may have no one coming." Marcus presented Evelyn's demands. An independent complaint office funded by Reed Logistics, but controlled by an outside board. Mandatory review of every security complaint involving physical removal, searches, or threats of police action. Protection for employees who intervened in misconduct. Training built around real cases, including the silence of staff and witnesses at Halston, and legal support for every adult whose complaint had been buried. The vote was not unanimous. It passed anyway. Continental Protective Services attempted to challenge the contract termination in court. Rachel's team responded with internal emails, altered incident reports, and testimony from former supervisors who admitted complaints had been downgraded to protect profitable accounts. Within 2 weeks, 3 executives resigned. Howard Bell, the regional director who had approved the complaint closures, was dismissed and referred to licensing authorities for review. Claire Whitman released a written statement claiming her words had been misunderstood. The full email chain became public the next morning. One message instructed staff to watch for vehicles inconsistent with donor-level arrivals. Another praised Grant for resolving what she called visual disruptions without involving senior management. The language was careful. Its purpose was not. Claire's professional association opened an ethics review. 2 event firms canceled contracts with her consulting company. She appeared once outside her attorney's office, shielding her face from the rain while reporters asked whether she regretted what happened to Evelyn. She offered no answer. Grant Miller's review moved faster. Exterior cameras showed him pulling Evelyn from the Buick after Daniel confirmed her name was on the list, Phone recordings captured him stepping on the envelope and dismissing her request for medical care. His written report claimed she had become aggressive and attempted to force entry. The footage showed the opposite. The police department terminated him for misconduct, dishonesty, and misuse of authority. The state revoked his private security license. When the decision became public, some people demanded harsher punishment. Others accused Evelyn of destroying a man's life. A reporter asked her about that outside Carter's corner. Rainwater dripped from the edge of the awning. Traffic hissed over the wet road behind her. "Do you feel responsible for what happened to Officer Miller?" Evelyn looked directly into the camera. "No." The reporter waited. Evelyn continued. "Shh, consequences did not come from my bruised arm." Her voice stayed even. "They came from his choices. Do you forgive him? I hope he becomes better than what he showed us." "Is that forgiveness?" "It is hope." She paused. "Hope does not require me to protect him from accountability." The clip spread farther than the video from Halston. Not because it was dramatic, because it refused the easy choice between revenge and silence. Daniel Price began working with Rachel's team after Continental fired him. Marcus offered him a management position at Reed Logistics, but Daniel declined. "I'm not ready to supervise anyone," he said. Instead, he helped build the company's intervention program. The first training session took place inside the same Halston lobby where Evelyn had been humiliated. Employees sat beneath the photograph of the silver thimble. Daniel stood at the front without a uniform. On the screen behind him appeared a still image from that morning. Grant holding Evelyn's arm, Claire watching, guests recording, Daniel standing several feet away with the list in his hand. He did not excuse himself. "I knew her name was there," he told the room. "I knew something was wrong before it became cruel." He looked at the image. "I waited because I wanted someone with more authority to act first." A woman in the front row asked, "What should you have done?" Daniel answered without hesitation, "I should have checked the list out loud." He took a breath. "I should have stood between them before he touched her." Another employee asked, "What if you lose your job?" Daniel looked toward Evelyn, seated quietly near the back. "Then the company has revealed what kind of place it is." The room remained silent. This time the silence did not protect wrongdoing. It allowed the truth to settle. Weeks passed. The cameras outside Carter's corner gradually disappeared. News vans moved on to other stories. The calls slowed. Evelyn returned to her routines. She opened the shop before sunrise. She repaired Thomas Green's uniform. She packed groceries for Marcus Bell after his second medical appointment. She rode the city bus with Linda Brooks when Linda felt nervous about traveling alone. But ordinary life did not return as easily as Evelyn expected. Whenever a police car slowed near the shop, her shoulder tightened. Whenever someone reached suddenly toward her arm, her breath caught. She stopped driving the Buick for nearly a month. The keys remained in a ceramic bowl beside Samuel's photograph. One Friday evening, Marcus found her sitting alone in the driver's seat. The Buick was parked behind Carter's corner. The engine was off. Streetlights reflected softly across the windshield. He opened the passenger door and sat beside her. Neither spoke for a while. A bus passed at the end of the block. Someone laughed outside the diner. Warm light glowed from the tailoring shop behind them. "I thought fixing the car would help," Marcus said. "It did. But you still haven't driven it." Evelyn looked at the steering wheel. "I spent years telling people not to let fear decide where they could go." Marcus waited. "It is harder advice to follow when the fear belongs to you." He placed his hand on the dashboard. "We don't have to go anywhere." She looked toward him. "Then why are you sitting here?" "Because you are." Evelyn smiled. A small smile. The first easy one he had seen since Halston. She placed the key in the ignition. The old engine turned over with a familiar rumble. Marcus fastened his seatbelt. "Where are we going?" Evelyn adjusted the mirror. Her repaired glasses reflected the streetlight. "Just around the block." She pulled slowly from the parking space. The Buick moved past the community hall, the bus stop, and the pharmacy glowing beneath red neon. Her hands remained steady on the wheel. When she returned to Carter's Corner 10 minutes later, several neighbors were standing beneath the awning. Linda waved. Thomas raised both hands in celebration. No reporters, no ceremony, just people who knew what the drive had cost her. Evelyn parked, turned off the engine, and sat quietly for one moment. Marcus looked at her. "You did it." She touched the silver thimble resting against her chest. "No." She looked toward the warm doorway of her shop. "We did." Across the street, workers were placing a new sign above the community hall entrance. The training center would open the following month. And for the first time since the morning at Halston, Evelyn believed that justice might mean more than punishment. It might also mean making the road home feel safe again. 4 months later, rain tapped softly against the front windows of Carter's Corner. It was the gentle kind of evening rain that turned streetlights into blurred gold circles and made passing buses sound farther away than they were. Tires whispered over wet pavement. The pharmacy sign across the street glowed red against the dark. Warm light from Evelyn's shop spilled onto the sidewalk in a wide, welcoming square. Inside, the sewing machine hummed beneath an old brass lamp. Evelyn guided a charcoal coat under the needle, repairing a torn pocket for a hospital technician who had promised to pick it up after the late shift. She wore her repaired navy coat over the back of a chair. The torn shoulder seam was nearly invisible now. Only Evelyn knew where the fabric had split. Only she knew how carefully she had stitched it back together. The small silver thimble no longer hung around her neck. For the first time in decades, its familiar weight was missing. She noticed the absence often. Each time her fingers reached instinctively toward her collarbone, she remembered where it had gone. The Halston Innovation Center had placed it inside a permanent exhibit beside the damaged invitation, the original founding agreement, and the photograph of Evelyn standing with Marcus in the empty warehouse. The display did not describe her as a billionaire's grandmother. It called her a seamstress, a neighborhood advocate, and the founding benefactor whose sacrifice helped build Reed Logistics Technologies. Evelyn had agreed to loan the thimble on one condition. The exhibit had to include a second photograph. Not the moment Marcus called her grandma. Not the unveiling of the plaque. The photograph showed the driveway before the truth came out. Evelyn stood beside the Buick with her coat torn and her glasses missing. Grant's hand was on her arm. Claire watched from several feet away. Daniel stood frozen with the guest list. Beyond them, wealthy guests stared from behind glass. The caption beneath it contained one sentence: "Dignity was present before recognition arrived." The bell above Carter's Corner rang. Evelyn looked up. Marcus Reed stepped inside carrying a long rectangular package wrapped in brown paper. Rain dotted the shoulders of his dark overcoat. "You walked from the car without an umbrella," Evelyn said. "It was 10 feet. And rain falls in all 10 of them." Marcus smiled. "Yes, ma'am." He set the package on the counter. Evelyn returned to the coat. "What is that?" "Something from Halston. I already told you I don't need another plaque." "It isn't a plaque." "A photograph?" "No." "A check?" Marcus laughed. "You always assume the worst." "Experience." He waited until she finished the seam. Evelyn trimmed the loose thread, folded the coat carefully, and placed it inside a paper garment bag. Then she looked toward the window. Across the street, the former Brookside Terrace Community Hall had been transformed. New glass doors stood beneath a blue and silver sign, Evelyn Carter Work and Technology Center. Through the windows, adults moved between classrooms filled with computers, logistics maps, and training equipment. Some were learning inventory systems. Others were preparing for paid positions in medical transport, facilities management, and technical support. Every student received wages during training. No unpaid trial periods. No promises in place of pay. The first class had started 3 weeks earlier. Thomas Green's 52-year-old sister, Denise, was training as a hospital logistics coordinator after losing her office job during a company merger. Marcus Bell, still recovering from his warehouse injury, was studying dispatch operations so he could return to work without heavy lifting. Linda Brooks volunteered 2 afternoons a week at the front desk, though Evelyn suspected Linda spent more time making coffee than answering phones. Several former complainants from Rachel Foster's investigation served on the center's Independent Oversight Council. Anthony Parker represented building service workers. Celeste Turner represented restaurant employees. Leonard Harris represented retirees and transit workers. None of them held ceremonial positions. They possessed real voting authority over security contracts, complaint procedures, and workplace access rules. Marcus followed Evelyn's gaze. The evening class is almost full. I know. 42 adults enrolled for next month. I know that too. You keep pretending this isn't remarkable. Evelyn looked at him. I think it is useful. To you, that's higher praise. It should be. Marcus unwrapped the package. Inside was a simple wooden frame. The original founding agreement rested beneath museum glass. Evelyn's signature appeared at the bottom, beside Marcus's younger one. The cream envelope had been preserved exactly as it was found. Torn edge, smeared seal, Grant's boot print crossing Evelyn's name. Beside the document was the silver thimble. Evelyn stared at it. I thought those were staying at Halston. These are replicas. She looked more closely. The thimble appeared identical, down to the tiny scratch Samuel had made while repairing a sewing machine in 1989. Marcus reached into his pocket. The real thimble lay in his palm. Evelyn did not speak. I wanted you to have it back. She touched the metal carefully. The shop seemed to grow quieter around them. Rain against glass, the hum of the heater, a bus sighing at the corner. Samuel's voice existed somewhere inside those ordinary sounds. You had the exhibit changed? Marcus nodded. A replica stays there. The agreement and envelope on display are archival copies. Rachel said the originals belong to you. Evelyn lifted the thimble. You went through a lot of trouble. You went through more. She slipped the chain through its loop and fastened it around her neck. The familiar weight settled against her chest. Her eyes closed briefly. When she opened them, Marcus was watching her. Thank you, she said. He placed the framed agreement on the wall beside the old photograph of Carter's tailoring shop. For a moment, past and present rested side by side. The narrow storefront that had been lost, the agreement that built an empire, the damaged envelope that exposed a system. The room was quiet until headlights swept across the windows. The restored green Buick pulled to the curb. Daniel Price stepped from the driver's side. He had borrowed the car that afternoon to bring Evelyn's groceries from the community market while hers was being serviced. He carried 2 bags into the shop. Evening. You drove carefully? Evelyn asked. Daniel placed the bags on the counter. 28 in a 35. That is not what I asked. Yes, ma'am. I drove carefully. He no longer worked in private security. Rachel's investigation had led Reed Logistics to establish an independent training and accountability office. Daniel had joined as an instructor, not a manager. Every class began with the same security photograph from Halston. He told employees exactly what he had seen, exactly when he knew something was wrong, exactly why he had remained silent. His honesty had made some executives uncomfortable. That was why Evelyn believed the training mattered. How was today's session? Marcus asked. Daniel removed his wet jacket. Hard. Good hard or bad hard? Honest hard. He looked toward Evelyn. A woman in the class asked how long a person gets to hesitate before silence becomes a choice. Evelyn considered the question. What did you tell her? That hesitation is human. Daniel paused. But the longer you protect your comfort, the more danger someone else carries. Evelyn nodded. You are learning. I'm trying. That is learning. Across the street, the training center doors opened. Adults began stepping into the rain. Some carried laptop bags, others held workbooks beneath their coats. Linda Brooks stood inside the entrance, waving everyone toward the covered walkway. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The building went dark. A few voices rose in surprise. Marcus looked toward the electrical panel inside Carter's corner. The whole block? The pharmacy sign had gone black. Street lights faded. Only emergency lights glowed inside the training center. Evelyn immediately reached for a flashlight beneath the counter. Daniel opened the shop door. Rain and cool air swept inside. Across the street, an older man using a cane stood uncertainly at the curb, unable to see the uneven pavement clearly. Evelyn stepped into the rain. Marcus reached for her arm, then stopped himself. The old instinct to protect her was strong, but he remembered, help was not the same as control. Would you like my arm? He asked. Evelyn looked at him. Yes, sweetheart. Together they crossed the wet street. Daniel followed with the flashlight. Evelyn reached the man at the curb. His name was Walter Mills, 67, a former restaurant cook retraining in inventory management after arthritis forced him away from kitchen work. Take my hand, Evelyn said. Walter smiled with relief. I thought everybody had already left. Not while you were standing here. She guided him over the curb and beneath the awning of Carter's corner. More adults followed. Within minutes, the small tailoring shop filled with wet coats, tired faces, and quiet laughter. Evelyn turned on 2 battery lanterns. Their warm glow spread across the sewing tables. Linda brought coffee from the training center's insulated urn. Thomas Green arrived from the hospital and helped move chairs. Marcus Bell carried paperwork beneath his good arm. No one waited for a powerful person to give instructions. They simply saw what needed to be done and moved. Evelyn stood near the open door, greeting each adult by name. The rain softened. Power returned block by block. The pharmacy sign flickered red. Streetlights brightened. The training center windows glowed again across the road. Still, no one hurried to leave Carter's corner. The room felt too warm, too alive. Marcus stood beside the framed founding agreement. He watched Evelyn listen to Walter describe his first week of classes. She encouraged Denise before her interview. She reminded Marcus Bell to attend his therapy appointment. She gave Linda a container of cornbread to take home. The billionaire could have purchased every building on the block. He could not manufacture what Evelyn created simply by remembering people. When the last guest finally stepped into the clearing night, Evelyn held the door. Marcus waited behind her. You could let somebody else do that, he said. Do what? Stand in the cold holding doors. She looked toward the adults crossing safely beneath the streetlights. People notice when a door is closed, she smiled. They should notice when one is held open too. The final woman leaving the shop was Celeste Turner. She paused beneath the awning. You know, Miss Evelyn, none of this would exist if Marcus hadn't arrived that morning. Evelyn shook her head gently. The truth existed before he arrived. Celeste considered that, then nodded. You're right. She stepped into the night. Evelyn remained at the doorway. Warm light spilled over her shoulders onto the wet sidewalk. Across the street, the training center sign shone against the dark. Marcus joined her. They recognize you now, he said. Evelyn touched the silver thimble at her chest. Recognition is pleasant. She looked toward the nearly empty street. But it is not the same as dignity. What is? The way you treat someone when you believe they have nothing to offer you. A bus stopped at the corner. Its doors opened with a soft, mechanical sigh. An elderly passenger stepped down carefully. Before he could ask, Daniel crossed the sidewalk and offered directions to the training center. Evelyn watched him. Marcus watched too. Neither said anything. They did not need to. Evelyn turned off the shop's front lantern, but left the light above the door glowing. She had done that every night for years. For workers coming home late. For neighbors caught in the rain. For anyone who needed to know there was still one open door on Brookside Terrace. The city skyline shimmered in the distance. Halston's glass tower was visible beyond the rooftops, bright against the clouds. Her name stood inside that building in bronze letters, but Evelyn's true legacy remained here, in repaired coats, paid opportunities, second chances, and people learning to step forward before power gave them permission. She closed the door only after the last person was safely inside the training center. Then she turned the lock and walked back toward her sewing machine, the silver thimble resting where it belonged. This story reminds us that silence is not always neutral. Sometimes it gives wrongdoing room to grow. Real courage is often nothing more than choosing to act before power makes it safe. Today, if you see someone being dismissed or treated unfairly, move closer and ask, "Are you all right?" Evelyn never needed a crowd to rescue her, but one honest voice could have kept her from standing alone. What would you have said if you had been outside Halston that morning? Tell me below, and stay with us, because the next story begins with another ordinary person everyone chose to overlook.